Today in the group chat, the Senate race in Michigan down to the wire. Can moderate Democrats stop the socialist surge?
Is you're seeing a transformation of the Democratic Party.
And dangerously low, that's the stark warning about the military stockpile and the key defense system that has nearly depleted. And an immigrant held at an ICE detention facility in New Jersey has died. That facility plagued with allegations of inhumane conditions. Now his family is demanding answers. And the House Ethics Committee has opened an investigation into Congressman Max Miller after abuse allegations, but he is not backing down.
No one has told me to get off the ballot, and that's because they know I can win this seat and see this through.
We knew that this was going to be a close race, and that's exactly what we've got.
I wish I could tell you that I was declaring victory right about now. Turns out it takes a long time to count some votes in Michigan.
And all eyes are on Michigan as results are still coming in from last night's Senate primary. Good morning, everybody. I'm Audie Cornish, and here is where we begin that Senate race. Votes are still being counted. The race is still very close. Abdul El-Sayed is winning 6 in 10 Election Day and early in-person votes. Congresswoman Haley Stevens winning nearly most of the same mail-in votes, and those are still coming in. And then the big focus is Wayne County. It's the home of Detroit. Notoriously slow at counting, and Stevens is winning that count by only a slight majority. Her lead has shrunk over time because of new ballots coming in for El-Sayed from cities including Detroit and Dearborn. Now, both Stevens and El-Sayed addressed their supporters late last night and have both already turned their attention to the Republican nominee, Mike Rogers.
And I know you're listening, Mike. We are coming for you. This is a guy who has never seen a check from a corporation he did not want to corrupt himself with.
They want to keep the U.S. Senate red, so Mike Rogers can keep rubber stamping Donald Trump's ridiculous agenda, higher prices, 1,000 manufacturing jobs lost nationwide, corruption and abuses of power galore.
Today in the group chat, Betsy Klein, CNN senior White House reporter, Oye Oloa, D.C.'s representative in the House, Terry Schilling, president of the American Principles Project, and Antoine C. Wright, Democratic strategist. Full table today. We don't have a winner, so when there's no winner, reporters got to talk about something else. We're going to talk about what makes a winner, which is money, endorsement, and enthusiasm, right? So first of all, we have the enthusiasm. It's too early to call, but we know that more than 1.2 billion million ballots have been counted so far, and that's more than any non-presidential Democratic primary in Michigan going back to 1998. So we know the turnout is there. Also, in terms of money, this was the most expensive Democratic primary ever, with more than $60 million in outside money going to Haley Stevens. But here's what some voters had to say when we asked them about the issue of money.
I don't want somebody that's in somebody else's pocket, that they have to agree to what they want to. You know, too many people like that in politics.
Overall change in people who had an independent view and thought process of what's right for the voters, not what's right for corporate PACs.
Betsy, can I go to you? There's been this kind of divide with money. Democrats actually aren't raising as much as Republicans, but the money they are getting, they're fighting over because of where it comes from. Give me the state of play through the lens of the Senate race.
Well, in this particular race, money was a giant factor, particularly for Haley Stevens. She received a significant amount of outside money from AIPAC, the Israel-aligned group, and that became very controversial in this race. But when we look at what we can extrapolate from these results, the answer is really not much. This says a lot about what is happening in Michigan. It does not say a lot about what is happening in the party writ large. And I think we need to listen to the voters of Michigan. We can learn a lot about what that's going to mean for them in November of 2026, they're going up against Mike Rogers, a very formidable candidate. It's going to be very interesting.
In what way? Just Trump support? Does he have a lot of money? What is it about Mike Rogers that means that they've got to have someone, quote unquote, electable?
I think that he has a lot of appeal to independent voters. I would be interested for anyone's
that's
take
how you
there.
feel too?
Well, keep in mind he only lost to Alyssa Slotkin by like less than 100,000 votes. So it's going to be a battleground race in Michigan. I agree with you mostly in what you said about Michigan is a reflection of Michigan, the same way I thought that New York races were a reflection of New York. But there is something to extrapolate from the race last night in Michigan. One, black voters and working class voters are not bought into this idea that some white, majority white pundits, pollsters, and posters on X are trying to define about this narrative within the Democratic Party. Black voters are still the core, and when we talk about working class voters in a place like Michigan, we should include black working class voters.
Which we mentioned yesterday because Haley Stevens was seen at some churches, and there were black leaders who were endorsing her, and I think that has often been a wild card, right?
So that's like number one. Number two, yes, we're having growing pains in different conversations within the party, but that does not mean the reality that a battleground race is much different than a primary race. And we're going to have to consolidate some thinking and some personality and egos if we want to get to 218 in the House and the majority in the Senate. Otherwise, we are going to lose.
Okay, I don't know who you're talking about in terms of personality and egos, but I do want to play for you Senator Bernie Sanders.
Prime example.
I didn't say it. Wherever this race ends
Antoine
up,
Seawright, the
he
Democratic
says
strategist,
it's going to be a change in the Democratic Party. The reason why I want to play this is because Sanders has backed nearly 90 candidates across federal and state and local races. He's had a lot of wins. We did not put them all up there. We didn't even put up the 40 wins. But for someone who's not in the Democratic Party, he's making a lot of inroads. Antoine, wait a second. Let the man speak. Here's Senator Sanders.
Is you're seeing a transformation of the Democratic Party. It's not only ideology that we disagree with the Democratic leadership about, it's how you do politics.
Is the rise of the DSA good for your party?
Look, we are a big tent party, and being a big tent party is a strength, not a weakness.
The last time I heard someone saying we're a big tent party and these folks maybe don't seem electable, but actually they're fine, there was a guy named Donald Trump.
Yes. No, look, I think you have the rise of left-wing populism going on right now, and I think it's primarily driven by the
overall populism.
Overall populism. Yeah. And I think America's either going to get a situation where there's some optimism in the American people and turning things around, or they're going to get socialism. I think people are losing hope. I think these young people, if you look at Abdul al-Sayed, he overperformed with young people by 25 points in Michigan. Though that is another way of saying the young people are the people that don't have assets right now. They don't have property. They don't own things. They want to be part of that. They don't have a mortgage for a home anymore. They have a mortgage of student loan debt, and they want something different. And I think what these young people are telling us is that they don't trust the Democratic establishment to represent their best interests. They actually think that the Democratic establishment will sell them out to private equity as soon as they possibly can.
Here's what Senator John Fetterman has to say, because he's, needless to say, on the flip side of a kind of political conversation where Bernie Sanders might be. He was talking with Jon Stewart about this, and here he is.
You could agree with them 90%, but Israel is the red line.
Absolutely. Israel for me. Like, I can't ever turn my back to Israel.
You're saying that these candidates may have great ideas for our economy. They may want to do the exact same thing you want to do in terms of getting money out of politics. But if they don't agree with you on Israel, you don't want them in your party.
What I'm saying is, like, if you are a DSA member, if you are a member of a specific political party, run under your own banner. The DSA are colonizing the Democratic Party. So just be Democrats if you're going to run under the Democratic Party for that. Why have a DSA party?
Member of DSA party. Please. I didn't expect you to have to answer a colonizer argument, but can you try and tackle some of that? He's very specific there about what his problem is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, number one, we're seeing a lot of messaging about the DSA as if every member believes in everything on the DSA platform. What interested me about the DSA was their fight for Medicare for all. Me being a pharmacist,
But hear what he said.
Yes.
Run under your own banner. Don't colonize the Democratic Party.
Well, I'm also a Democrat. I've been a Democrat my entire life. And part of the reason why I am a Democrat was because when my parents moved here in the 1970s, it was really a party that believed in immigrant rights. You know, although the Immigrant Reform Act was passed by Ronald Reagan, we saw a lot of Democrats also support and give a pathway to citizenship.
So how does it feel when you hear Democrats rejecting the politics of the DSA, the politics you have right now, and saying, there's a lot of red lines for us here, and you guys are making a mess of things ahead of the general?
I think right now people are making excuses of the fact they're losing to economic populists. When Donald Trump ran in 2016 and 2020, he ran a populist agenda, even though as the president he's doing different things. And I believe right now when you look at the economics of the situation, we're going backwards. When my parents moved to this country, the average income for a median income family was $70,000. Today, that's $400,000 in economic power. $18,000 in lower class, which is now $150,000 in
So you're kind of going where Terry's talking about.
But riddle me this. If the belief is so strong in this narrative, I'm not telling you that people are not suffering from an affordability crisis in America, then why haven't these races panned out in a general election? I could give two damns about primary elections. And I'm very passionate about this because I'm a black man, I'm a Southern Democrat, and my party is not defined by these extreme voices that the media wants to project. Why can't, if the message is so strong and there's such a deep belief, then why historically have we not seen wins in terms of competitive general election seats? We have to win in November. Primaries do not matter.
Certainly. I think the stack was decked against Bernie Sanders. When you talk about the super delegates in 2016. The super delegates, they were already given to Hillary Clinton before.
You can't say that for two presidential cycles in a row that the stack. People voted, and they did not vote for Bernie Sanders in two presidential primaries elections, including my home state of South Carolina, where 60% of the people who cast their vote were black voters.
Right, and Donald Trump won twice in the last 12 years. So I think that we're going to see a much different election results nowadays than we did years ago. The rise of independent media, people listen to podcasts. I think that has increased young people voting, and I think that's going to make a difference.
We are going to come back to this race. We're going to come back to this race in a little bit, as much as I'm sure Terry is enjoying this, because there is some pretty serious stuff going on in Congress. That Congressman in Ohio, Max Miller, who's facing a lot of abuse allegations from his ex-wife, spoke to CNN.
So if I really did those things, why wouldn't I be in prison? It's because it's an extreme fabrication of the truth.
We're going to talk about why he is refusing to step down, despite warnings from even the president that it might be tough to win. Plus, Jane Pirro's big box of evidence, is that going to help her keep her job? And this dire warning, a volcano in its, quote, critical explosive phase. There are some evacuations going on right now in Guatemala. Hey, we've got this news just in moments ago. Congressman Chuck Edwards actually dropped his bid for re-election. And this is just days after the House Ethics Committee found that he violated rules around sexual harassment. Now, in a post on social media, the North Carolina Republican writes in part, quote, "After much prayer and reflection, I've decided to withdraw from my re-election campaign. I will complete my current term." Meanwhile, Congressman Max Miller also not backing down, even as more accusations of abuse are coming to light. The Ohio Republican sat down for an interview with CNN's Jake Tapper on Tuesday, where he denied all allegations against him. Now, his former father-in-law, Ohio Senator Bernie Moreno, is pressuring him to abandon the race and to leave Congress. And Miller says he's not going.
I am going to be successful in this November because my constituents know who I am, and they also know who my ex-father-in-law is, and they also know who my ex-wife is. And that's why you've seen people aren't running from me. My numbers in fundraising are strong. You know, Speaker Mike Johnson, everyone else, they're standing behind me. No one has told me to get off the ballot, and that's because they know I can win this seat and see this through, and that's what we're going to do.
Okay, group chat is back. I wanted to talk about this because we saw Chuck Edwards drop out, right? A lot of pressure around him. Meanwhile, when Trump was asked about this, just to comment on Miller, he said, "I hope he's able to work it out. I feel badly for him." Senator Thune on Tuesday was asked about Miller, and he says, "It's just a sad, unfortunate case. It's a family matter. Didn't have any more observations beyond that. What's going on, the reluctance here, as this plays out so publicly, so viscerally, and a child's involved?
Exactly, all of the above. But President Trump is also close with both Max Miller, who worked on his 2016 campaign, worked in his White House, and he is close with Bernie Moreno, the senator from Ohio, his former father-in-law. So it's putting him in a very tough spot. He is very reluctant to get publicly involved. However, one, it is great that Max Miller was willing to show. He is willing to answer tough questions from our colleague Jake Tapper, who really pressed him, I think did a good job of that. There are a lot of ways that this interview did not go well for him. For instance,
can I play an example very briefly?
Please.
Because then your characterization will make more sense.
Yeah.
So he was asked about the allegation of claims that his child may have made about him. This has come up from his ex-wife, and Jake asked him about it. Here's how it started.
I then played Lauren Fox 3 separate audio videos, 3 separate audio videos of my daughter saying, I do not want to go to mommy's, I do not want mommy's, and I do not feel safe.
Your ex-wife stated to police that your child told her in the days leading up to the discovery of the injury, quote, Daddy, kill you.
She can't string together sentences like that. She's 2.5 years old.
You just told me that she had said that she was scared to go to mommy's house.
She is, and I have video of it.
But
and
now you're saying that she's not capable of saying, Daddy, kill you? I mean, it seems like she's either able to say one but not the other.
Jake,
that doesn't make sense.
Jake, to be very direct, this is incredibly disturbing. I am not going to my child to say, Daddy, kill you.
It was a lot of that.
Right. It was him vehemently denying these allegations time and time again. He said if he did those things, he would be in prison. He suggested that his father-in-law was concerned that he would, quote, expose a deeply personal, embarrassing matter to the senator. He described himself as a punching bag. He named his minor daughter. He said that all 3 women who have made these allegations are lying.
We should say the past that Jake brought up was an allegation stemming from his college years, and then later on in the first Trump administration. And right now, he and Stephanie Grisham are in court back and forth over defamation and bringing those allegations up again.
And it's incredibly messy. It's unfortunate. You know, he justified staying in the race by saying that he wanted his daughter to see that he's not a quitter. But the reality is that one day his daughter is going to read and watch all of this. And it's just a deeply unfortunate
He's sick
moment.
and he needs help. That interview was an audition for an audience of one, and that's Donald Trump, because he needed affirmation or confirmation to stay in the race and to punch through. He made reference to Donald Trump because we've seen Donald Trump push through strong allegations in an environment where Democrats are taught and sanctioned to believe women. And we've seen a lot of people lose their office and drop re-election bids for a whole lot less. That's like framing. Number 2, I think the party of family values has a question to answer. Chuck Edwards, Corey Mills, Ken Paxton, Max Miller, Donald Trump, and others. So I'm not interested in Republicans coming on any program lecturing the country and Democrats about family values when they have their own right in front of them, that yet the Speaker of the House and his colleagues have refused to say, you know what, you need to step aside.
One thing I want to say is we're going to have a member of the House Ethics Committee coming on later today. You can put some questions to him. And to some of the names you mentioned, obviously with President Trump, those things have been litigated in court, at least some of them. And in the meantime, you are right. There are people facing House ethics violations over sexual allegations. What does the party of family values say?
Well, look, first of all, I think voters would have a lot easier time going with the Democratic Party if they weren't so bad on every other cultural issue, like pornography for kids in schools and in libraries, all of that, the sex changes for kids, so it all gets very weird. So they'd have an easier decision to make if there weren't policy ramifications for voting for Democrats. But I will just say, Max Miller in that clip, he's talking about his poll numbers, he's talking about his fundraising. He's not talking about his family. He's not talking about his daughter. She's 2.5, and right now she's being used back and forth as a pawn. It's getting very sad. It's a distraction. These are very serious allegations, and I know that if this was someone that I was working for, that I was advising, I would strongly advise them to take a step back. Congress is going to be there in years to come.
That's not the advice. He's doing live streams.
It's crazy.
He's doing lengthy interviews. Like he's putting out so much information that his lawyer had to apologize for including a photo, an inappropriate photo of his daughter. It's flood the zone, which we know is, we've heard people, Steve Bannon talk about it, but it's not working. It's drowning him instead.
Yeah, and I'm also not seeing any Republican talking head on any cable or otherwise network going on to defend him. He is his own only ally right now.
Except, Betsy, they're not also telling him he should resign. Whereas on the Democratic side, when these things happen, it's this extreme pressure. You need to leave the race, you need to resign, and the results are a little bit different from people within our own party and from the Republican Party. So sometimes silence means consent.
Oh, yeah?
I 100% agree with you. I mean, we're still talking about Graham Plattner weeks after he left the race and still pinning him on other candidates that are running who are also endorsed by Bernie Sanders. And at the same time, House Speaker Johnson says, I'm going to let it all play out when it's on the other side. He wants to get people expelled from Congress. I also want to mention as well that Max Mills is probably going through the 5 stages of separation from Donald Trump. First, it starts with, I feel bad for him, and ends with, I don't really know him that well. And I believe that he is trying to placate to President Trump because he sees that as his only way of staying in Congress. But as these conversations continue, as he continues to blunder through interviews, we see it for what it really is. And I do believe that not only it being an election cycle, but also seeing Chuck Edwards resign over, in my opinion, probably less damning information. It shows that in 2026, people are not going to let this go.
Well, in the meantime, I do want to end on this. This is how Miller explained his custody battle. And I want to play it because obviously he is not here to defend himself. So here's what he said to Jake Tapper.
I have full shared parenting. I still have full medical parenting, half. I still have full half education. If any of these things were true, Jake, a judge would have taken our baby girl out of my hands. What you have is a very sadly politically motivated scenario to where, people want to see me go away.
Okay, we're going to talk more about this, as we said, with someone from the House Ethics Committee. In the meantime, we're going to turn to defense and this issue of a stockpile warning. Right now, a key missile defense system is dangerously low. We're going to talk about what that means for military readiness for the U.S. And then I want to say good morning to beautiful Orange Beach, Alabama. All right, we're going to talk about this development involving the war with Iran. We've got multiple sources telling CNN that the U.S. military has depleted nearly 80% of the interceptors for its critical THAAD missile defense system, which is designed to destroy incoming ballistic missiles. Now, roughly half the supply of Patriot missiles has also been used up. Senior U.S. military commanders now warning that the Pentagon's munitions stockpile is, quote, dangerously low. But here's the thing. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is denying CNN's reporting. He's saying it's not true. He's saying we don't hate the fake news media enough. Now, Gulf allies, however, are raising concerns about how the shortage could impact their ability to defend against Iranian retaliation if President Trump decides to, say, escalate the ongoing conflict. And adding to the urgency, Iran is now threatening to attack U.S. vessels in the region. So we're bringing in Becca Wasser to the group chat. She's the defense lead at Bloomberg Economics. Okay, so we've got the head of the military saying it's not true. There is no shortage or diminished supply. What say you? What do people know in the world of military analysts?
All right, so the U.S. isn't out of missiles, but it is running incredibly low of certain types of missiles. So it is running dangerously low of air defense interceptors, those THAAD interceptors, Patriot, and those are needed to protect U.S. forces, U.S. allies, and the American homeland.
And to clarify, because especially in Iran, where they're shooting off really cheap drones, they shoot off their cheap drone, that's like $30,000, and then we use our very expensive missiles to shoot that down.
To shoot them down. And usually this is missile-to-missile ballistic defense as opposed to counter-drone defenses at this juncture in time. But those are incredibly important. And then the U.S. is also running low of some of its long-range standoff munitions, the missiles that it uses to essentially prosecute war from afar and keep forces safe. And so all of this matters is because whenever you put forward a potential operation, let's say if President Trump decided he wanted options for escalation again. You have to say, what is the risk to mission and what are the risks to forces? And without some of those critical air defense interceptors and some of those other long-range munitions, that risk to forces grows enormously.
The thing I've been hearing, though, is munitions are made to be used, and we are in a war. We are also here and there, when we decide to, helping Ukraine, right, in its war against Russia. So is it the concern that this is a problem for the war we are in right now, or is it, what I often hear, this sort of future scenario around Asia and China in the Indo-Pacific?
It's both. Right now, the U.S. is probably constrained in its operational options in Iran.
Wait, say that in English. Constrained in its operational...
Constrained in what it can do. So if President Trump says, bring me options for the next phase of the war, some of those options are going to be a lot more limited than they were a few days ago. And then if we're looking for, the U.S. global role, the U.S. doesn't have enough missiles and munitions to protect itself and its allies. Plus, if you're looking to future conflict, these missiles take years and years and years to build. This is a generational gap that cannot be overcome in a short amount of time, and that has major implications for U.S. military power and security around the globe.
Okay, Beck, I hope you come back, because I think this issue is going to come back, especially with the defense secretary on the defensive about it. We really appreciate you. Straight ahead on CNN this morning, the president wants to extend the National Guard post in D.C. Is it worth the $1.4 billion price tag? And then there's this.
Thank you so much for saving my life.
The 10-year-old boy in California speaking out, thanking the lifeguard who rescued him from dangerous waves. This was in California last month. The little boy hurt his back and lost consciousness during the rescue. His father says he's still recovering. So President Trump's National Guard deployment extension in D.C. coming with, of course, a price tag. It's going to cost you $1.4 billion to keep thousands of National Guard members in D.C. all the way through January 2029. That's the estimate the Defense Department has provided to Congress. And it's been nearly 1 year since troops have been on the ground, a tense year for some of the people of D.C. It's now expected to stay that way until Inauguration Day 2020, the day Trump is supposed to leave office. Now, he has said he wants to make D.C. safe and beautiful. We're going to talk about what all this taxpayer money has actually done for the district so far. The D.C. National Guard's interim commanding general says this is what they've accomplished. They've responded to 788 medical incidents. They have administered 325 Narcan doses. They have intervened in 262 fights. He says the goal is zero crime.
Every visitor and every resident deserves to be in an environment where they're safe, they're secure, it's predictable. They don't have to fear going out.
So the group chat is back. Oh yeah, I wanted to ask you about this. You live in D.C. right now. I'm going to put it up on the screen. There's about 4,600 National Guard troops. That's got to be bigger than the police force. So they better be doing all this stuff. But what is your concern? How happy are you with your ability to walk the streets right now?
Well, the National Guard is a solution to a problem that we don't have at a price tag we cannot afford. At a time where we're facing the highest in D.C. in unemployment rate because of the DOGE cuts, we're seeing money being wasted on National Guard members who don't even live in D.C. We're talking about folks who live in South Carolina, we're talking about folks who live in Alabama who should be home with their families, but they're now here in D.C. watching metro stations.
I do have to say the National Guard is planning a $292 million plan to house the service members for their deployment here in D.C. I want clean streets, but number one, there's no metric to end it. Zero crime, I think, is unrealistic for any city. And if there's no metric to end it, how do you keep justifying the spending?
Well, look, I think it would be a totally different question if D.C. wasn't a failed city. They want statehood.
By what metric?
By the fact that there are hundreds of shootings in the city. It's down since the National Guard was deployed. There were shootings in the Golden Triangle. There were shootings at Nats Park. There were innocent people. And
Here's
look,
what is I want to
billion.
just put up the data so people have the data, and you can have it too while you're talking. 2026 year crime comparison for D.C. Homicides are down 35%. Robbery is down 16%. Motor vehicle theft down 53%. Violent crime up 0.3. At what point can you say the National Guard has done a good job, y'all go home?
Well, I don't know what's included in the violent crime, but murder being down by 30%, car thefts being down by 52% sounds great to me.
Yeah.
So
So when is job well done? When is this mission accomplished?
I don't, as soon as D.C. can show that they can operate without the National Guard, I think that would be great. But let's be honest, it was a dangerous city. Union Station was an absolute mess. You get approached by homeless person after homeless person. It reeked of weed. I just got back from New York last week. It was clean. It was open. I didn't get harassed by anyone. It didn't smell like weed.
Is that what you're trying to say?
No. I'm saying that when I arrived in Union Station, my friend.
Antoine looked too delighted. He looked too delighted at that.
But Terry, with all due respect, if the president was serious about lowering crime and all these things, then why not bring together a coalition of mayors, as Joe Biden did, and let's figure out how to put together funding mechanisms in place to deal with those issues from a long-term perspective and investments in cities. What the president has done has been intentional about trying to identify cities predominantly. We have higher African-American populations or cities ran by black mayors as if they're crime-infested, they're bad, and they're the worst in America. And I think that's the wrong narrative to project if you're serious about trying to do something about problems that existed before Donald Trump and likely will exist after Donald Trump.
Look, I think there is charity in speaking truth, regardless of if people take offense at it, and you have to acknowledge serious problems if you want to make progress. D.C. had a violence problem. You had to bring in the National Guard. There were over 300 murders in 2024.
The violent crime is up.
I don't know what they're, but homicides are down, car thefts are down, all those other.
Can I give you one set of facts? Those numbers were going down in a lot of places
Can I let
before
the person
Donald Trump.
Before,
but this is an important fact.
Yeah.
Those numbers were going down before Donald Trump came into office. That's true around the country.
This is not about safety. This is about control. The only reason why Donald Trump can do this in D.C. is because we're not a state. He tried to do this in other states and it did not happen. When you're talking about our crime statistics, as you mentioned, Antoine, our numbers are already going down. So it's not as if he was solving a problem. And at $1.4 billion, you can invest in community-based organizations. You can put things in mental health. You can put drug boxes to make sure people dispose of medication so kids aren't getting high. You can do plenty of other things to empower D.C. residents rather than ship people from out of town and now spend over $300 million to put them in housing at a time you can put the unhoused into spaces. This is a complete waste of money.
Okay, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate your time. Next on CNN this morning, Congressman Chuck Edwards dropping out of his race for re-election after an ethics investigation. We've got Democratic Congressman Suha Subramaniam, who sits on the Ethics Committee, here next. Plus this.
People were bamboozled again, deceived again.
Progressives hit a snag in Missouri. Cori Bush losing her rematch. As we go to break, stunning new numbers show the president's fight night was a big L for UFC. The BBC is reporting that the UFC lost $30 million when hosting the event. The CFO told investors Monday that it was due to significantly higher than normal costs just to hold that Freedom 250 event. All right, so we've got some breaking news this morning. Congressman Chuck Edwards is dropping his bid for re-election. This is happening just days after a House ethics investigation found he sexually harassed 2 staff members. Now, in a statement on social media this morning, Edwards said in part, quote, "After much prayer and reflection, I've decided to withdraw from my re-election campaign. I will complete my current term." Meanwhile, embattled Congressman Max Miller, he's refusing to drop out of the race. He tells CNN that he is welcoming a newly opened House ethics investigation into his past.
It's an honor for me to have a platform like this to continue to fight and to continue to show the American people that I've already been looked into. I'm happy to be looked into again.
His ex-wife, his ex-girlfriend, and a third woman have all independently accused Miller of becoming violent during their relationships. Miller, in an interview with CNN's Jake Tapper on Tuesday, said that those women are lying.
Do you realize what it is in terms of how tall an order it is for voters and your colleagues and everybody watching right now to believe that 3 women who don't know each other made up accusations of you being violent, and you are telling the truth here, they are lying? That is a difficult thing for people to believe, right?
No, not in this instance, because every single one of these things that you're brought up, unlike other candidates throughout the country, I've already had investigations into.
Okay, joining us now, Congressman Suha Subramaniam. He's a Democrat from Virginia. He's also a member of the House Ethics Committee. Now, I know you can't get into the details of this investigation, but lots of people are commenting on it, and we'll come to Max Miller in a minute. First, Chuck Edwards, who has stepped down in the end, but the Democratic Women's Caucus issued this statement that I think is worth mentioning. They say the Ethics Committee recommendation to censure Edwards has no real consequences. It just means he has to stand on the floor of the House while the censure is read, a few minutes of embarrassing C-SPAN coverage, while the staffers themselves had to endure over 2 years of sexual harassment. It's not comparable. They had to leave their jobs, so should Rep. Edwards. He should resign immediately. Edwards, as we now know, has resigned, but he says he's not going right away. He's still going to be hanging around Congress. What's your response to them saying that censure has no real consequences?
Censure does have consequences. You can also lose your committee seats, for instance. And in the end, it's a serious deal. The voters will see that, and they'll be able to act accordingly. And also, you know, if those folks in the House want to, for instance, expel him from Congress, they have the ability to bring that expulsion motion to the floor as well. And so the House can vote on it. The Ethics Committee gave Chuck Edwards and gives everyone the opportunity to state their case. And we offer, you know, due process to everyone. And so this is the recommendation that the committee has put out. But, you know, the House members are welcome to bring other motions if they so feel.
I want to put up for you, because you guys are pretty busy. There's a lot of names there. We're going to put up of people from Max Miller, Eric Swalwell, a variety of people who the last couple of months have faced some kind of ethics questioning over their treatment of women specifically. Mm-hmm. Is the Ethics Committee even built to deal with this kind of issue? Right? Like, I think of you guys as complaining about dudes who put a brick of cash in the freezer, which is a real thing that happened a few years back.
That is a real thing.
Can you deal in intimate partner violence and sexual harassment? Because it sounds like there's a lot of women on the Hill unhappy.
Yeah, well, let's talk about what the Ethics Committee is. The worst thing we can do to someone is expel them from Congress. But we don't put them in jail. We're not a court of law. We're just, you know, 10 members of Congress as well as our staff. And so we do the best we can. People try to stonewall us. They try to avoid getting interviewed by us. And we've seen it all at this point. But this Ethics Committee, I would say, unlike past Ethics Committee, has moved as faster than any other one. We've taken all these seriously. You've seen that we've had 3 members of Congress resign instead of facing the consequences of this Ethics Committee. So again, there's more that needs to be done. We're talking about reforms to make the process go faster, but we'll never be as fast as the news cycle. But I'll say there were Ethics Committees in the past that existed to defend the members, to stonewall other people. And now this Ethics Committee is taking
Meaning they would say, we're investigating, everyone back off.
Yes, people were put on the committee specifically to protect other members of Congress. That is not the case anymore. It is bipartisan, and we actually, you know, work really well together to make sure that everyone gets due process, but everyone is held accountable.
Can I ask you about Max Miller? This investigation is happening?
We have launched an investigation into Max Miller, and we will give him and anyone else who is being investigated full due process, and we will do the fact-finding, and we have a wonderful staff who looks into every aspect of this. And often what happens is we'll see one allegation that comes out publicly, and then after the investigation, we'll see many other things that happened with a member. And so the investigations sometimes take longer than the news cycle, but in the end, we give people due process, and we hold them accountable.
Let me play for you guys Max Miller on Tuesday. He was talking about why he thinks he's still going to be successful, why he's not going anywhere.
I am going to be successful in this November because my constituents know who I am, and they also know who my ex-father-in-law is, and they also know who my ex-wife is. And that's why you've seen people aren't running from me. My numbers in fundraising are strong. You know, Speaker Mike Johnson, everyone else, they're standing behind me. No one has told me to get off the ballot, and that's because they know I can win this seat and see this through, and that's what we're going to do.
Terry, can I ask you what he's saying there? He says, my fundraising is good. People aren't running from me. He talked about Mike Johnson.
Yeah, you got the nice little dig at Senator Bernie Moreno, who's a great father. I had him on my podcast to be totally transparent, but I really like Senator Bernie Moreno. But look, I said this before on the show.
But he's like, if House leadership isn't running from me, why should I have to go anywhere?
Look, I think it would be helpful to have some clarification there, obviously, but at the same time, this guy really has to assess what's more important, your reelection or your family and your 2.5-year-old daughter. For me, it would be my family, my 2.5-year-old daughter, or my 8 children.
Okay, 8 children. Okay, I just want to check back in with all of those primaries, let you guys know what's going on with the news. Right now, Michigan's largest county, remember we're watching the Senate race there. It's still being counted, I think it's Wayne County, and tight races there. That primary is between Abdul El Sayed and Congresswoman Haley Stevens, and it's bringing out a historic number of voters. As of 1 a.m., more than 1.5 million ballots have been counted so far. That blows past the turnout record for any non-presidential Democratic primary in Michigan going back to at least 1998. And progressives, of course, are hoping to pull off a win in Michigan. That wasn't the case for them in Missouri. Moderate Wesley Bell fended off former Congresswoman Cori Bush. She's a former member of the squad in the House primary. And then in Virginia's 10th District, Republican Dave Beckwith wins the GOP primary. He'll face off against none other than Congressman Subramaniam here in November. What is going to be your focus, right? You're going to go up against a Republican, but he's going to be able to easily tie you to these democratic socialist movements, or maybe you're going to get flack from the left. Give me a sense of what your focus is.
Oh, just my district, even the Trump voters are so angry at this administration right now. They've plunged us into a forever war in Iran. They've fired federal workers and contractors in our community. They've basically gone back on every promise they made in 2024. And Republicans in Virginia and across the country still continue to hang their hat on President Trump and rubber stamp all of his policies. And so this is going to be about that, but also about our positive vision for making sure we lower costs, we make healthcare more affordable for people.
Where are you on the question of whether or not DSA members or DSA adjacent candidates affect the broader ticket, affect the party?
Look, they're going to be part of our coalition. We already have DSA members in Congress. I work quite well with them. In the end, we're going to be a big tent in the Democratic Party. And what people want right now in these primaries, you're seeing it across the country, is they want change. They want fighters. They want someone who will stand up. So some of these races have been less about ideology, more about style as well, and making sure you have someone who's going to fight rather than someone who will continue the status quo.
Since you're our guest here, we're going to talk about group chats.
Okay.
What's in yours other than obviously these insane stories happening before the Ethics Committee?
I'm in a fantasy football group chat. We have a fantasy football league, and I'm going to a commander's training camp this morning.
A real one, not a fantasy
A real
one.
one, not a fantasy training
Like
camp
that.
to scout some of the commander's players. I have Terry McLaurin on my fantasy team. But yeah, right now we're monitoring all these training camps to see who we should trade for and who we should draft.
In the fantasy
football league, yes.
Okay, what's in your group chat, Terry?
My wife has abandoned us at home. She took the baby up to Boston to see
I thought you were going
my
to say she had
in-laws.
another baby.
No,
I was afraid.
Not yet.
Terry.
We're working
Okay,
on that.
yeah.
But I'm back home with the other children, and I will just say we are having the time of our lives. We are watching every classic movie. We've watched all the Indiana Jones series, all the Star Wars series, Lord of the Rings, and I will just say this. I am blown away by how useful and helpful these kids have been. My 11-year-old son, Bobby, MVP, absolutely. He's been helping clean and help take care of the
I
younger
like
ones.
using like football language here
Yes.
because that's how many kids there are. Okay? You have
It's almost a baseball team. That's right.
All right, Antoine.
These style versus substance conversations we're having in our primaries will not define us. Whether we win in November with a coalition centered in black, centered in rural, centered in working class, to include young people, will define us as a party, not these style versus substance primaries.
Betsy, last word to you.
Discussions about a MySpace reboot. And for me, a millennial, this warms my heart. We are talking about like this return to 90s style parenting. Like I want to return to 2003. I want like to customize my profile. I want my top 8. Where is Tom? A lot of questions.
You want feral parenting. You want, pre cell phone. I get it. All right, you guys, thank you for being with us. Congressman, thank you for being with us. I'm Audie Cornish, and the headlines are next.
It is too close to call. The big Democratic showdown in Michigan still underway. Progressive Abdul El-Sayed, Congresswoman Haley Stevens locked in a tight race to win the Democratic Senate primary there. We are tracking the results as they are still coming in this morning.
Embattled Congressman Max Miller defiant despite growing pressure to drop his re-election bid. The Republican spoke exclusively to R. Jake Tapper, saying he's staying in the race despite the abuse allegations against him by several women. What he says President Trump told him in a recent call.
And breaking overnight, we are standing by for official word from NASA about a rocket crashing into the moon, hurtling towards the lunar surface at 5,000 miles per hour. I'm John Berman with Kate Baldwin and Sarah Seidner. This is CNN News Central.
We are watching a cliffhanger in Michigan this morning. The votes still being counted in one of the most closely watched races in the entire country this year. Democratic Senate primary that has come to embody the fight for the soul of the Democratic Party right now. Progressive Abdul El-Sayed and the moderate Congresswoman Haley Stevens locked in a tight battle right now. You see where things stand at this moment. El-Sayed has a narrow lead. The race remains unresolved. The place that everyone is watching at the moment is Wayne County, where Detroit is, which is notoriously slow in counting ballots throughout history. This is how it has been. El-Sayed and Stevens, they addressed supporters in the wee hours of the morning, likely as you were sleeping. Watch.
I wish I could tell you that I was declaring victory right about now. Turns out it takes a long time to count some votes in Michigan. It's a big state.
We knew that this was going to be a close race, and that's exactly what we've got. A close race.
The winner of this Democratic primary will face the former Congressman, Republican Mike Rogers, in the general election this November. But there is a whole lot of time, clearly, before that, and at least one very big result to finalize. Let's get to Jeff Zeleny in Detroit for us this morning. And you were up late last night watching all of this come in, Jeff. Where are we right now?
Hey, Kate, good morning. I mean, this is the closest of close races, and there have been many of them, of course, here in Wayne County and Detroit. But for all of the national implications of this is coming down to a very local contest in question right here in Detroit. At this hour, Abdul El-Sayed is leading Haley Stevens by 19,400 votes out of 1.5 million votes cast. That gives you a sense of how close this is. I saw Abdul El-Sayed just a few minutes ago. He was standing right in front of our hotel here, ready to do a different interview, and he gave me a thumbs up, but it is unclear when exactly he is going to be able to move forward here. Haley Stevens realizes her path to victory is a narrower one, but that path does exist because of mail-in votes right here in Wayne County and Detroit. But both candidates last night made clear that they were still trying to talk about unifying the party. Both have pledged to support the other, and they started trying to turn their attention to the man watching all of this with glee. That's Republican nominee Mike Rogers.
And I know you're listening, Mike. We are coming for you. This is a guy who has never seen a check from a corporation he did not want to corrupt himself with.
They want to keep the U.S. Senate red, so Mike Rogers can keep rubber stamping Donald Trump's ridiculous agenda, higher prices, 1,000 manufacturing jobs lost nationwide, corruption and abuses of power galore.
Look, both of those speeches were delivered in the early morning hours, and that is not what either of them believe. Stevens supporters thought that this progressive movement was going to be enough to effectively stop the establishment. That also did not happen, but there's no doubt that El-Sayed was expecting an earlier victory. Some of his top supporters actually put out statements congratulating him, saying that they should be released after the race was called. He was hoping to give a speech during the primetime hours last evening. That didn't happen, Kate. So the votes need to be continued to be counted here in Wayne County. But one thing is clear, unifying this party may be much more difficult because of the narrow factor of this race here. Black voters in Wayne Wayne County, Detroit, other parts of Michigan clearly were supporting Haley Stevens. There is some work to be done unifying the party regardless of who wins. But again, Michigan's so important because Democrats must hold this seat and flip for Republican seats if they want to try and win control of the Senate. So a little bit more counting to do here this morning in Detroit. Kate?
A little bit more counting, a whole lot of analysis, and a general election then to move on to. It's great to see you, Jeff. Thank you so much. Much more to come. Sarah?
All right. Thank you, Kate. This morning, after 3 women have come forward accusing Ohio Congressman Max Miller of abuse, he remains defiant. He is refusing to drop his re-election bid despite mounting pressure over those allegations. Miller's ex-wife is one of the 3 women from his past who have said that Miller abused them. Miller spoke exclusively with CNN's Jake Tapper yesterday, just hours after Miller himself requested the House Ethics Committee to open an investigation.
I am never going to give up. And what I mean by that is my daughter's going to grow up one day, and she's going to see all of this. And she's not going to see that her father caved to political and social media pressures for something that he never did. I will never, ever, ever let my baby girl see her dad walk away as a quitter.
CNN White House reporter Adam Cancern is joining us with the very latest on this. Give us some sense of some of what we also heard from him when he spoke to Jake and how this goes forward with him calling for an investigation of himself.
Yeah, Sarah, I mean, the Max Miller watch here as to whether he will stay in his re-election race or drop out continues again today. There's really just kind of growing concern across the Republican Party about his ability to remain in this race, these domestic abuse allegations not going away. And it's with the concerns of Republicans, potentially going to cost them a seat that otherwise should be safely red. Now, Max Miller has remained defiant throughout all of this. He has denied all of these allegations. He said he wants a House Ethics Committee investigation into himself to clear his name. And then you also saw in this interview with CNN's Jake Tapper yesterday saying that, essentially all of this is false and that he will kind of see this through, refuse to resign. Sarah, listen to what he told Jake yesterday.
Are all 3 of these women who don't know each other, are all 3 of them lying?
Yes, it's very easy, and I can tell you why. Every single time, and people have asked me, what are you going to do? Are you going to drop out of this race? Are you going to resign? Are you going to get out before the deadline? And my answer to you, Jake, is no, and I can tell you why. In 2016, when President Donald J. Trump faced the most extreme allegations in the world that hit him day after day after day, and people in the media, very much like yourself and others, said that he would have no shot at winning, that he should not be the President of the United States. But guess what? He stayed in and he was resilient. For no second am I going to sit here and continue to be debased by false and baseless allegations and be pushed out of a seat I have worked so hard to represent and done a terrific job for our community. I've been a good legislator. All they're trying to do is create rumor mills without evidence. It's all hearsay.
So as you can see there, really no suggestion that he thinks he's in jeopardy or is willing to consider dropping out here in the next few days. Now, there only are a few days left for this decision to be made before his name cannot be taken off the ballot. Just one more note. I mean, Donald Trump, Speaker Mike Johnson, they are the 2 Republicans who probably could get him out of the race. They have refused to do that so far. Sarah?
All right. We'll see what happens in the next chapter of this. Adam Cancern, thank you so much. I do appreciate it. John?
All right, breaking overnight, an air safety incident involving President Trump aboard Marine One. We're just getting new details in. The already devastating wildfires exploding in Washington state, surging temperatures could make it much worse. And pretty incredible video, how a car managed to go airborne and crash right into the side of a bus.
This morning, the FAA is investigating an air traffic safety incident involving the president's Marine One helicopter and a passenger jet that was taking off at the same time. This unfolded just yesterday near Reagan National Airport as Marine One prepared for takeoff. You can see it. That's video of what was going on at that very moment. Now there's some new air traffic control audio, and you can hear Marine One's pilots try to notify the control tower that they were getting ready to lift off. Initially, the controller didn't respond, and then on a second call, the controller replied that the transmission was garbled.
Tower make sure you copy Marine 1, 3 minutes to lift. Tower, do you copy Marine 1, 3 minutes to lift? That's on, that's broken and readable.
Minutes later, Marine One said they were departing as planned.
Marine 1, you said your proceeding is briefed? National Tower, that's Marine 1, proceeding as briefed.
The controller warned them that the jet was taking off, and Marine One said that they saw it. They were holding their position. Officials say it does not appear to have been a dangerous close call. John?
All right, breaking overnight, rising temperatures and dry conditions in the Pacific Northwest threaten to make the wildfires even worse. Several fires near Spokane are still 0% contained. Thousands of residents remain under evacuation orders. In the Spokane area, more than 10,000 acres have burned and hundreds of homes have been destroyed. More than 200,000 acres have burned across the state. Tomorrow, the man accused of setting one of the Spokane fires will be arraigned on a first-degree arson charge. Kate?
Overnight, we learned at least 17 people were killed, more than 50 people injured after Russia launched a huge missile attack on Ukraine's capital city. Ukraine says none of the ballistic missiles fired by Russia were intercepted. And President Zelensky also spoke out overnight, saying that Ukraine's stockpile of air defense missiles now has dropped by 2/3 since last year. Zelensky is also accusing Russia and speaking out against what he is calling a drone safari now against innocent civilians. We showed you this disturbing video yesterday. Ukrainian officials say this is the moment. Just look at this. It's terrifying. An innocent street vendor, they say, was literally tracked and chased and attacked by a Russian drone. The man survived that explosion, is recovering now from his injuries. Coming up still for us, an armed man arrested at President Trump's golf club ahead of his visit there. The new details we are now learning this morning about the suspect. And a passenger train smashes through a farm trailer. Bales of hay sent flying. What authorities say the driver was doing before the crash that endangered the lives of hundreds of people. So the first earnings report for SpaceX since it went public is out, and it blew past expectations. Revenue for Elon Musk's satellite, space, and AI company soared by 92%. But the company did also show just how much cash it is burning through, particularly when it comes to AI investments as it tries to compete with the likes of OpenAI and Anthropic and more. CNN's David Goldman has been looking into this. So what did you learn in this report?
Yeah, I mean,
so far.
Well, so far, yeah. I mean, the stock is down 11%, and it's a little bit of a strange reaction because of everything that you just said, right? I mean, the sales almost doubled, up 92%, and that is one of the big traditional kind of metrics that we use to determine whether a company is successful. $8 billion in revenue, that's pretty good. Actually, it also pared its loss by a ton. It lost more than $500 million. That's not great, but it was $4.3 billion in the previous quarter. So, you know, that is a pretty good path forward for that company too. And also Starlink, one of the key businesses, remember, it's beaming the internet down from space. Those sales rose 66%. So what's the problem? Oh, also AI, which is its key business now. Well, those sales rose more than 200%. So why do investors hate what they saw? It all has to do with the amount of money that they're spending on AI, which exceeded $18 billion in 3 months. And this is what Wall Street is looking at, not just for SpaceX, but for all of these companies, right. OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Amazon, right? How much are you spending on AI? Because if you can't get this under control, investors are going to say, well, when are we going to start seeing the returns? If SpaceX is still posting a loss with all of the AI sales that it generated, well, then when are we going to get our share? This is a big concern on Wall Street right now, and SpaceX is just at the pointy end of the spear here.
It is definitely hard to wrap your mind around some of these numbers that you're throwing up on the screen.
Well, everything with SpaceX, it's hard to wrap your mind around. I don't get
From
it.
the technology to,
Yes.
to all of it. It's
You know
good to
what?
see.
We'll just leave it there.
Thank you, David. Sarah?
so hard about rockets? I understand it all.
Exactly.
It makes total sense.
It's not rocket science. Oh, it is rocket
Wait,
science.
but it is. Good one, David. All right, ahead. Concerns growing that the United States is rapidly depleting its weapons stockpile. How this could play into President Trump's next move in the Iran war. And police arrested airline pilot after they find 70,000 ecstasy pills in his bag. Now authorities are saying this could be part of a much larger international drug trafficking ring. Those stories and more ahead.
All right, happening now, we are still counting votes in Michigan in the much-watched Democratic primary for Senate there. As you can see, only 19,000 votes separate Abdul Al-Sayed with Haley Stevens. That was with 95% reporting. 95%, you might be saying there's a lot. So where is the remaining vote? We take this down. There's really only one place in the entire state with less than 90% reporting. That's Wayne County, where Detroit is. Let's go there. You can see Wayne County has about 84% reporting now. So there is some outstanding vote in Wayne County. This is the most populous county in the state. It makes up about 18% or so of the voters there. You can see in Wayne County, Haley Stevens is leading Abdul Al-Sayed by about 14,000 votes. We don't know exactly how many votes remain in Wayne County. The New York Times says it could be as many as 30,000. You can see the math is hard. The math is hard for Haley Stevens if she wants to overtake Abdul Al-Sayed, but at this point, not completely impossible, which is why we have not made a call. One other thing I want to point out here, again, you can see the margins in the state. Abdul Al-Sayed up by 19,000 votes. There is a third candidate here who dropped out of the race. We don't even have her on the screen. Mallory McMorrow, she has received 60,000 votes so far in this primary. You can see the number of people voting for her far outweighs the margin between these two candidates. So her presence on the ballot could have been decisive. Let's talk about this race, how tight it is. With us now, CNN political analyst Zolan Kano-Youngs of the New York Times. So we have not made a projection here, Zolan. We are waiting for more votes to come in, particularly as they come in around Wayne County here. The fact that it's still so close, what do you think this means? What message does it send? Everyone was looking for signs about progressive versus establishment. What have we learned?
Both sides here can point to this really, really small, tight margin and find some things to be enthusiastic about. If you're the Al-Sayed camp, you win up against a candidate that had a windfall of donations from outside groups, and you have this small margin now. If you're the Haley Stevens camp, you're pointing to the polling in recent weeks that showed Al-Sayed with a winning by a much larger margin, and you're pointing to that as a point of enthusiasm. As you noted, we're still waiting on Wayne County, and specifically many of the mail ballots and absentee ballots in Wayne County. This is an area covering much of Detroit. It also includes many black voters. Haley Stevens has fared well. Polls show with black voters as well, so we'll have to see how that factors into this race. But at this point, we have an incredibly tight race in one of the more significant primaries for the Democratic Party thus far, one that will say a lot about the Democratic Party's approach to foreign policy, how much electability this issue of does a candidate need to be experienced, do they need to have the vetting, or can you move with an outside candidate who also has experience, yet a different type of experience, who is campaigning in large part by shaking up the Democratic establishment.
Zolan, we've been talking about the results coming in from Michigan, but there is another House race, House contest people are watching, and that's in Ohio here that involves Congressman Max Miller, the Republican incumbent. He spoke to Jake Tapper. He has been accused of domestic abuse by an ex-wife. He denies those allegations, but one of the reasons he says he is not dropping out is really because of the example of Donald Trump. Listen.
In 2016, when President Donald J. Trump faced the most extreme allegations in the world that hit him day after day after day, and people in the media, very much like yourself and others, said that he would have no shot at winning, that he should not be the President of the United States. But guess what? He stayed in and he was resilient. And what the American people can see is that they can see that somebody is fighting who is resilient, and that is a quality that the American people cherish.
Now, Max Miller told Jake that Donald Trump spoke to him on the phone and said it'd be tough for him to win. And we have our own reporting that Donald Trump doesn't think Max Miller can win, yet he has not publicly called for him to leave the race, Ola.
You know, for months, really since Donald Trump came into office, since President Trump came into office for a second term, we have talked about the grip that he has on the Republican Party and the influence that he has over the Republican Party. And you have to think, in fact, actually local officials in Ohio believe this as well, that President Trump would actually be the person that has the best chance of convincing Max Miller to drop out of the race. And he did call him, and he described how tough how tough his chances were of winning given these allegations. But he chose not to call for him to drop out, and that is significant when you think about the power that Donald Trump holds over the Republican Party.
Okay, Zolan Kano-Youngs, thank you very much. And I just want to remind people what we are watching. We are watching the results come in from the Democratic primary, the Senate primary. In Michigan, you can see there's about 95% reporting. Abdul Al-Sayed up by 19,000 votes. Most of the vote remaining, we believe, is in Wayne County, the most populous county, where you can see only about 84% reporting. There could be 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 votes more here. So we're waiting for that vote to come in. Stand by for those results. Sarah?
We certainly will. Thank you so much, Sean. This morning, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department confirming an armed man was arrested Sunday outside Trump National Golf Club after federal agents reported a suspicious person walking the property. Deputies apprehended 38-year-old Janine Tail, finding a 16-round magazine containing hollow point ammunition in his pants pocket, as well as additional weapons in his vehicle and in his home. President Trump was on his way to California when deputies announced the arrest en route to a Republican National Committee dinner at the golf course. CNN's Elena Treen live at the White House with us. What is the latest on this particular case this morning?
Yeah, there's a lot of different details to get through in this case, Sarah. One, as you mentioned, an armed man was arrested on Sunday outside of the president's National Golf Club in Rancho Palos Verdes, just outside L.A. He was found, authorities say, with a loaded firearm and was seen taking photos of the property on multiple occasions. And as you mentioned, the arrest came just 2 days before the president traveled to that exact golf club for a fundraising dinner for the RNC. Now, the man was identified as 38-year-old Janine John Tail of Downey, California, and he was charged with multiple weapons violations. And now we know that Secret Service is trying to investigate. They're investigating and looking into whether or not he actually posed a threat to the president. One federal law enforcement source told CNN that there was no current indication that the person, that Tail of Downey, was plotting an attack on the president. But of course, they note the investigation is still ongoing. I should note that the president was on board Air Force One when deputies announced the arrest of Tail. He was first seen at the golf course on Friday. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Central District of California said he was wearing an earpiece and took photos and videos on the grounds of the golf club. He also filmed federal agents and appeared to be monitoring different security preparations ahead of the president's visit. He returned on Sunday. He lied about working for the State Department, and he did tell authorities that he had a weapon in his car. That's when they found the ammunition in his pocket, went to his car. They later went to his home, found a cache of more weapons. So a lot to get into here. Again, we do not know what his motive was, if there was any sort of threat that he wanted to pose to the president, but something Secret Service is continuing to investigate, Sarah.
Certainly strange, for lack of a better word. Elena Treen, thank you so much for your reporting there from the White House. Kate?
A years-long investigation in the Senate, and now the new report just revealed Wall Street, and revealing that, it says Wall Street failed the victims of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse. It's the culmination of a nearly 4-year investigation into Epstein's ties to Wall Street by the Senate Finance Committee, spearheaded by Democratic Senator Ron Wyden. What he found, they say, financial reports disclose that some of America's biggest banking institutions had concerns for years about money moves made by Jeffrey Epstein. But the report accuses them, the banks, of not doing nearly enough and not what Wyden says the law requires in reporting those concerns to the government until after Epstein was arrested on sex trafficking charges. Now, the report names more than a dozen bankers by name at JP Morgan, Bank of America, and Deutsche Bank, alleging that they were aware of suspicious transactions that Epstein made as far back as 2002, saying that the banks themselves, quote, likely violated federal anti-money laundering laws. And also this from the report. The bankers who needed to be asking questions didn't ask them. Jeffrey Epstein's crimes were hiding in plain sight, and saying if federal prosecutors are serious about preventing the next Jeffrey Epstein, they must hold Wall Street accountable. Joining us right now is Democratic Senator Ron Wyden, the top Democrat on the Senate Finance Committee. Senator, thank you for being here. I mentioned this is the culmination of a 4-year-ish investigation that you have been spearheading. This, when you say that Bank of America and JP Morgan Chase likely violated federal anti-money laundering laws, I see in this report, plain and simple, did these banks commit crimes?
Certainly, there's a lot of evidence to indicate that they did, Kate. And here's the bottom line. Epstein would not have gotten away with sex trafficking for so long if these bankers had done their job and followed the law. And the reality is they basically just looked the other way, and they knew for a long time that Epstein was dirty, and they just didn't do anything about it, and primarily because he helped them get more clients.
I'm going to get into the responses to this report in just a second, but I have been covering your push for answers on this front for years. You were pushing this investigation to follow the money back in 2022, 23, 24, meaning even during the Biden years. Most of what I have heard from you on this was pushing Treasury to release Epstein's financials. Did that happen here? Did the Treasury Department help?
Treasury did not. They've been stonewalling, nonstop. We got some information from the Biden administration, but when Trump came in, everything stopped, and we're staying at it. One of the reasons this election is so important is we want to get some people, for example, who are going to make the tough decisions so we can get subpoenas with Democrats, and we didn't get that with Republicans.
Let's get to the responses of the banks now, Senator. Deutsche Bank. The bank takes its legal obligations seriously, including appropriately responding to authorized investigations and proceedings. Bank of America. We take our legal and regulatory obligations seriously, and as we have previously said, the bank did not facilitate wrongdoing. JP Morgan. We strongly disagree with the report's conclusions. They say we began flagging suspicious transactions for the government as early as 2022 and throughout our relationship. And they say it is disappointing that instead of advancing new facts that would help bring accountability to the men who participated in Epstein's trafficking operation, the report largely recycles allegations that have already been exhaustively examined by courts and the government. They are saying that there's no new information here that hasn't been released before. What do you say to that?
Kate, that's just false, and particularly for Deutsche Bank to be involved in the whitewashing business is absurd. They failed to promptly report to Treasury more than $250 million worth of suspicious transactions that were tied to Epstein. That is brand new information for the public.
From the statements, it sounds like the banks seem not inclined to be digging further into their records and past dealings with Epstein to assist in what sounds like your investigation is not culminated, since you're saying you want to do subpoenas. If that's the case, what tangibly do you want to see happen now?
Well, I want to see Treasury and I want to see the Fed step in and look at these matters too, because it touches on the credibility of those agencies.
Safe to say your investigation is not complete?
We've got a long way to go. There's some accountability that has to be found, particularly because the top people at these agencies, these weren't the junior people, Kate. The top people were the ones who led the Looking Away program.
If your investigation is not complete, this has been going on for years now, as I mentioned. If information is still out there to be uncovered, why release this now? Especially, I will say, as you mentioned the election, Senator, especially when this is so close to an election.
Because this is exactly what elections are supposed to be all about. The Republicans ducked and bobbed and weaved for months and months on this. We're holding people accountable so it doesn't happen again. I don't think women and girls in this country should have to go through this again.
Why aren't Republicans on this report after so many years, Senator? Why isn't this bipartisan?
I don't think they want to explain why they were ducking. You know, for so long they just passed on these issues, never thought that we would go the distance and we'd get all this additional information. Now they're going to have to explain, but they objected to our getting the information again and again.
Big claims being made throughout this lengthy report. Senator Ron Wyden, much more to come here. Thank you for coming on to talk about it this morning. Sarah?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate. New this morning, Iranian state media is casting doubt on President Trump's claim that the Strait of Hormuz would be opening soon. Here's what the president said last night.
Iran, as an example, will never have a nuclear weapon. They already can't, but it's going to be formal. The strait's going to be open very soon, or they're going to get hit very hard, and then the strait's going to be open.
Iran says it is continuing negotiations with Oman over safe shipping routes through the strait, but that there is no connection between those talks and the strait reopening. Meanwhile, sources are telling CNN that the U.S. military has burned through nearly 80% of its inceptors for a key missile defense system, and senior U.S. military commanders are warning that the Pentagon's munitions stockpile is dangerously low. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, though, calling the reporting, quote, not true. Joining me now, CNN senior military analyst and former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, retired Admiral James Stavridis. Thank you so much for being here. If indeed nearly 80% of THAAD and half of our Patriot missile stock is gone since the Iran war began, how would you describe that? What does that mean?
Dangerous, in one word. And it's not only dangerous in the context of the Middle East, Sarah. It's dangerous in the context of Ukraine and dangerous in the context of Taiwan. Let me explain. What we're talking about here, and you're showing a picture of some of these ground-to-air defense missiles that go up and shoot down incoming ballistic missiles, drones, cruise missiles even. And if it is true, and you have to factor into this the denials from the Pentagon that are coming out, but if it's true that we're down 80%, we will be unable to fully help our allies in the Gulf, the Arab countries, and Israel defend themselves. We will be unable to provide any air defense interceptors to Ukraine, which will mean their war against Russia will go less well. And we will not have interceptors available to deter China. So bottom line, if this is true, these numbers, it's dangerous. And I know the combatant commanders around the world, which I used to be both in Europe and in Latin America, are very concerned.
I do want to ask you about just how long it takes to replenish, to rebuild some of these munitions, and what that also means, because in the meantime, Iran is using cheaply made things like drones to combat very expensive equipment that the United States is having to use. Give us some sense of the timeline of trying to replenish these.
You've put your finger on the real problem here. And by the way, it's not just air defense weapons. There are credible reports that some of our precision strike weapons, offensive weapons like ATACMS, like Tomahawk missiles, like precision strike missiles, these are also being depleted. So the problem, as you correctly point out, Sarah, is not only are they very expensive, but they are also long timelines to replenish. So you're not talking weeks, you're not talking months, you're talking years to rebuild these inventories. Now, the Pentagon is keenly aware of this aspect of things, is pushing the defense industrial base very hard to accelerate all this. We've done this before in other conflicts, but that's a challenge. Time is of the essence here.
Not weeks, not months, but years to rebuild is quite a thing. Admiral, thank you so much for walking us through that and giving us some really important insight into what's going on. I appreciate you. John?
All right, what happens when a 9,000-pound rocket collides with the moon? We could find out today. And then a car collides with the side of a bus. You can see it right there, literally, inside the bus. How both drivers are doing this morning.
We're watching the numbers roll in. High stakes race still too close to call this morning. The winner of Michigan's Democratic Senate primary is still up in the air, with outstanding ballots in the state's largest county known for its notoriously slow vote count. All right, this morning. Also, defiance from Congressman Max Miller after his ex-wife and 2 other women have accused him of domestic abuse. The pressure from his own party growing to drop his re-election bid, but he's vowing to fight. Our Jake Tapper is here with more on his exclusive interview with Miller. And a nasty crash leads to an all-out brawl on the highway and ends, we'll tell you how this actually ends up. And I'm Sarah Sider with Kate Baldwin and John Berman. This is CNN News Central.
All right, the breaking news this morning. This is the situation in Michigan where they are still counting the votes for the hotly contested Democratic primary for Senate there. Abdul Al-Sayed, seen as the more progressive candidate, is hanging on to a slim lead, very slim, about 19,000 votes over Haley Stevens, seen as the more establishment candidate there. That is with 95% of the vote reporting at this point. So where is there still vote? We can actually get a sense of where they are still counting. We can take it down and say, hey, where in the state has less than, say, 90%? It's just one place. There's only one place in the state right now where there is significant vote. That is Wayne County. That is where Detroit is. It is the most populous county in the state, about 18%, not just Detroit, but Dearborn as well. You can see in Wayne County, Haley Stevens is leading by about 14,000 votes. We don't know exactly how much vote is still remaining in Wayne County. The New York Times suggests it could be 30,000. Look, you can see the math would still be hard for Haley Stevens. She would have to win an overwhelming amount of the outstanding vote in Wayne County, which appears to be still absentee mail-in vote, but it is still possible. That is why we have not made a projection in this race. The situation is, it's very close. They're still counting. It's been at 84% in Wayne County since about 6 a.m. I haven't seen new vote come in from Wayne County. Likewise, in Michigan writ large, it has still been about a 19,000 vote lead for Abdul Al-Sayed since about 6 o'clock. That hasn't changed. So we are waiting and watching for more vote from Michigan to report. In the meantime, with us is Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, a Democrat from Michigan who knows a little something about this state. Congresswoman, good to see you this morning. Can you think of anyone at all, who said this race was going to be close?
Me. So I predicted to people yesterday it was going to be tighter than people thought that it was going to be. I just, when you looked at the last couple, I wasn't sure, I wondered if my gut-o-meter was off. I'm pretty good at calling races. And actually did say yesterday that I thought that a couple media outlets that this race would be tighter than people thought it would be. But I think we got to, the polls were way off. You all thought I was crazy. And people did think I was crazy a decade ago when I said that Hillary Clinton was going to lose Michigan. And I was right. And I think this was closer than that race was. But if you're on the ground, you would talk literally. And I had some of your colleagues with me. You know me, I'm just go out. I go around. I went to Vet Fest, the back to school. Numerous places. I would talk to couples, UAW couples, where actually the UAW member was voting for Haley Stevens and the wife was voting for Abdul. That probably happened 20 times. There are a lot of complex feelings right now. And what we got to do today is we're going to figure out who won this race, and we got to pull together, and we got to win in November.
One of the things that we are seeing, and it's pretty subtle, is, look, we can look back in at Wayne County again. This is seen as more working class, much more heavily African American, is where Detroit is. And then we go next door to Washtenaw County. That is where Ann Arbor is. Both of these, by the way, you represent Washtenaw County and a little part of Wayne County. Washtenaw County is where Ann Arbor is, the University of Michigan. In Ann Arbor, in Washtenaw, Abdul Al-Sayed has a huge, huge lead. Right, so you have more highly educated, maybe more suburban, college-educated voters, and then when you go in the areas that may be more working class, you see Haley Stevens with a little bit of a lead there. So how do you heal what might be that rift there?
So you got to bring people together, and you got to talk about the issues. I live in Washtenaw County. I live in Ann Arbor, and I'm going to make an observation that Haley spent very little time here to start with. But Abdul was very good at meeting with people, talking to people. He started his campaign in this area. Mallory was here often. And we didn't see Haley that much, quite frankly, in Washtenaw County. So I wasn't surprised to see her. Western Washtenaw County has traditionally been more Republican than Democratic. Tim Walberg represented it until I picked it up 4 years ago. So, but Abdul talks to people and listens to people. What I think all of us are going to have to do, and I went and pulled an op-ed I wrote a decade ago after the Hillary loss. We got to listen to working men and women. We got to listen to what they're telling us, what they're scared about, and we got to show that we understand the issues they're talking about at the kitchen table. That's what I said a decade ago, and it's still real. They don't want a lot. They want to have a job that they know is going to be secure, make enough money to buy a house. Nobody can afford to buy a house now, and the kids can't even afford to rent. And the kids that are graduating can't find jobs. That's a problem. They want to make enough money to put food on the table, go to the grocery store. They can't. You know, so whoever wins this is going to have to go out and talk to everybody. And all of us have a responsibility to pull people together and remind them what's at stake in November. We cannot elect someone that is going to be a rubber stamp to this White House.
Congresswoman, I want to shift, if I can, for a moment from Michigan, where we're watching here, and talk briefly about a representative from Ohio, and that's Max Miller, who represents the 7th District Republican. His ex-wife is accusing him of domestic abuse, which he denies. There have been 2 other women in the past who've accused him of abusive behavior. He did an interview with Jake Tapper yesterday, where he said he's staying in his race and denied all the allegations. Listen.
Are all 3 of these women who don't know each other, are all 3 of them lying?
Yes, it's very easy, and I can tell you why. Every single time, and people have asked me, you know, what are you going to do? Are you going to drop out of this race? Are you going to resign? You know, are you going to get out before the deadline? And my answer to you, Jake, is no.
So, Congresswoman, your thoughts on what you heard and your thoughts about the fact he says he's staying in the race?
You know, this is an issue that I care very deeply about, John, and I didn't talk about it for years, and I do talk about very openly and honestly. I lived in a home where I know what it's like to hide in a closet, to not sure if you're going to live through the night, to be in a situation where guns are being held at each other. Actually had to grab a gun and keep my father from killing my mother. My father taking knobs off doors and the kids not able to leave. And nobody believed us. And you didn't know. You couldn't go anywhere. There was nobody to help you. The person I'm most worried about right now is that 2-year-old child. And I'm going to be one. I think when you see these kinds of allegations and the pictures of a gun in the situation that we saw is worrisome. And I am not going to sit down and be quiet when there are domestic abuse allegations. People are entitled to due process. But that 2-year-old has been traumatized, and no one is ever an advocate for the kids. And I'm going to be an advocate for that daughter. I'm going to be an advocate for that woman. And we've got to understand that domestic violence happens in too many situations, all kinds of situations. And when you're in a privileged background, people don't want to believe you. They give you passes. They do. We cannot do that.
Congresswoman Debbie Dingell from Michigan, thank you for talking about Several subjects with us this morning. We always appreciate your insight. And I should note, we're going to have Jake on in just a little bit to talk about this remarkable interview with Max Miller. Kate?
Yeah, the Congresswoman speaks from experience that she has only really recently started to talk much more about in order to offer strength to others, and it is a harrowing story. Up ahead, an armed man arrested at President Trump's golf club, the same club that the president was flying to last night. What we are learning this morning about the suspect. And a convicted felon has been charged now with first-degree arson in connection to one of those massive wildfires burning still out in Washington state, where we're learning about him and also how the fight is going now to try to contain those flames. And a teenager dressed as a clown is arrested in a bizarre death investigation. We have new details coming in.
Embattled Congressman Max Miller says he's not going anywhere, despite allegations of domestic abuse from his ex-wife and 2 other women, including a former communications director of the White House. Miller is refusing to drop his re-election bid, even as he faces growing pressure to step aside from members of his own party. The Ohio congressman spoke exclusively with our Jake Tapper. Here's what Miller said about his conversation with President Trump about him staying or leaving the race.
You spoke with the president yesterday. Did he tell you what he is telling aides privately, that he does not think you can win?
Look, the conversation I had with him yesterday at 9 a.m., and I've gotten a million phone calls about this, and this is what's so troubling. Look, he called me and he said, Maxie, it's going to be a tough race. And he said, I don't know if you're going to be able to, pull this one out. And you know what, Jake? I reminded him of the same resilience that he had when people told him that he was going to struggle in 2016 and he became the 45th president of the United States. And I have the utmost confidence that my constituents back home know me.
All right, CNN anchor Jake Tapper joining us now. Jake, you're one of the best doing these interviews, and you asked him a very simple, important question about these allegations. What did he tell you?
Well, he seems to be, as he suggested in the clip you just ran, following the Trump model, which is full steam ahead, deny everything, and make himself out to be the victim in this situation. And I pointed out several times that his ex-wife, Emily Marino, is not the only one who has accused him of abuse, that there was the previous relationship he had with White House Communications Director Stephanie Grisham, in which she made allegations. And then there's this woman who says in high school he pushed her down the stairs. And I said, is it true? All 3 of these women are lying? They don't know each other. You think all 3 of them are lying? And he said, yes, as you heard. And that was the interview. And, we were pretty well steeped in the case and asked him a lot of detailed questions about a lot of things that happened, including the fact that when he went and did a live stream on Sunday to defend himself and released a tranche of information in a Dropbox that supposedly was proving that he was a good father to the 2.5-year-old daughter that he and his ex-wife have, that in that file, in that Dropbox, was a nude photo of his daughter that his lawyer later apologized for including, is a photo that his ex-wife's attorneys suggest could be considered child sexual abuse material. And he acknowledged it, but said that it was being taken out of context and that her genitalia was not visible. It was really quite a stunning interview.
It was very, very stunning. Jake, you talked to Miller about his baby, his 2-year-old daughter, who reportedly said that she didn't feel safe at his home. How did he respond to this?
He denied that she was even capable of speaking in sentences like the ones his ex-wife had reported to Child Protective Services, I believe, in their custody battle and in complaints about him. He said that she's not even capable of doing that. But at a different time, he described his daughter as saying something that was as complicated and complex a sentence. So it didn't really make a lot of sense. I think we have that clip.
I then played Lauren Fox 3 separate audio videos, 3 separate audio videos of my daughter saying, I do not want to go to mommy's, I do not want mommy's, and I do not feel safe.
Your ex-wife stated to police that your child told her in the days leading up to the discovery of the injury, quote, "Daddy, kill you."
She can't string together sentences like that. She's 2.5 years old.
You just told me that she had said that she was scared to go to mommy's house.
She is, and I have video of it.
But
and
now you're saying that she's not capable of saying, "Daddy, kill you"? I mean, it seems like she's either able to say one but not the other.
Jake,
that doesn't make sense.
Jake, to be very direct, this is incredibly disturbing. I am not going to my child to say, "Daddy, kill you."
So it is disturbing. He's right about that. And there are a lot of questions that I think people probably left after watching the interview, having in their head that he didn't fully answer.
Yeah, I mean, there's one question that is not in people's heads when you see that back to back. He contradicts himself when it comes to his 2-year-old and what she is capable of. But there's just so many disturbing details here. And there's, of course, the political background of all of this. And I know you'll be watching all of this, but the interview was extraordinary. Jake Tapper, thank you so much for waking up early for us this morning. And we'll see you this evening between 5 and 7. Appreciate it. Kate?
Yeah, a lot of questions coming out of that conversation for sure.
Very much.
Well, breaking overnight, the FAA is investigating an air traffic safety incident involving President Trump aboard Marine One. There is new video coming in this morning. We're going to bring that to you. And we're also standing by for official word, perhaps coming from NASA anytime now, about whether a piece of a SpaceX rocket crashed into the moon overnight, how it could impact space missions in the future. A man arrested outside the president's golf course in Southern California is expected to be in court today. This all happened Sunday, but we're really only learning about it now. The suspect is 38-year-old Janine John Tail. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department said that he was arrested after federal agents reported a suspicious person walking the property, and he was found wearing an earpiece and taking photos and videos of the grounds. They say they later found a loaded pistol, ammo, and binoculars in his truck. President Trump was on his way to California last night to speak at an RNC event when this arrest was announced. Joining me right now is CNN senior law enforcement analyst Andrew McCabe for much more on this. He's going to be back in court. It seems that they have a lot of investigative material under their belt already, though. What questions do you have, Andy?
Yeah, Kate, well, the big question here is, what was this guy doing, right? So he's been arrested on firearms violations, both at the federal and state level. Those charges seem to be very strong. They've got great evidence to work with, the prosecutors do. But the bigger question is here is, did this person, were they intending to bring any harm to the President of the United States? And in order to answer that question, you can see from the complaint that's been released about Mr. Tail, he's being subjected to what is undoubtedly a full-field investigation by the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force in the Los Angeles area. So they are going to look deeply at everything they can find associated with him. They've already searched his residence. They'll search any other place that's associated with him. They'll look for electronics devices. They'll look for his social media accounts, for his telephone numbers, email accounts, things like that, to find statements and anything that would shed light on what his intent ultimately was. But there are, Kate, a couple of things here that kind of cut against the idea that this guy was some sort of an advanced operational planner.
But tell me what cuts against it.
Well, simply the fact that he was first observed on the golf course, I think on Friday afternoon. He was seen acting suspiciously, taking photographs, videos, had an earpiece in, all the accoutrement, as it were, of a actual security detail person. He then appears again on Sunday at the golf course, and on that day, he actually precipitated the interaction with law enforcement. He approached law enforcement and very readily answered questions. That's not the kind of thing that you would see a terrorist do, or someone who was at the golf course conducting operational surveillance or planning an attack. They would flee. Certainly, once they'd already been seen by law enforcement, once they would go out of their way not to be seen again. So that's a little bit odd. He also had false indicators of affiliations with law enforcement. He had fake badges in his car. He had more fake badges in his house. So it's really questionable, I think, this point, whether this guy is a serious threat or whether he is, a disturbed person that was engaged in some activity. Either way, it's got to be investigated. The simple fact that he could present a threat to the president of the United States means you have to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah, but you really kind of lay out some of the interesting, complicating contours of what they've uncovered so far, and clearly they're in the midst of an investigation now, and he will be in court today. Andy, it's great to see you. Thank you so much. Go pick up that text message now. Appreciate it. Sarah.
All right, this is just in to CNN, just a few minutes in. The race for Michigan's Democratic Senate primary, we have just learned, is getting even closer, even tighter at this hour. We have those new numbers, and that's ahead. Also, a rollover crash ends in a wild brawl on a busy highway. So how did this insanity end? Details on that ahead. All right, new numbers coming in right now as we speak, as votes are being counted in Michigan's most populous county. The Democratic primary Senate race is getting even closer, with moderate Congresswoman Haley Stevens behind, but gaining a bit. It is a race that could help decide who ultimately controls Congress. Let's look at this really tight battle. Progressive Abdul El-Sayed has a narrow lead, but the race at this point is still unresolved. Nobody is getting called the winner yet. Whoever wins, though, will take on Republican Mike Rogers in November. CNN's Harry Enton here now to run the numbers. All right, where is the outstanding vote and how large is the outstanding? Because that's the key, because even though these numbers look really tight.
Right. Okay, so let's sort of set the stage for you here, right? You mentioned, Sarah, the race is getting even tighter. When Johnny B was on at the top of the hour, the difference between them in terms of vote total was about 19,000. Now, we're going to zoom in very tight here. How much is Abdul El-Sayed ahead by now? A little bit less than 15,000. So we've had the gap close. We've had the gap close by 4,000 votes. So what we see is Haley Stevens absolutely getting this race tighter. Now, more than that, you right now see that the race is just a point. In fact, when you go down to decimal points, we're actually a race that is tighter than a point. Now, why is that? What is going on? What is tightening this race? Well, come with me. We're going to go down to southeast Michigan. We're going to go to Wayne County, of course, where Detroit is. And Haley Stevens has been doing quite well in Wayne County, right? She leads right now over Abdul El-Sayed by about 17,000 votes, or about 6 percentage points. That gap has been widening. More than that, it has been widening as the vote is coming. Right now, we have 88% of the estimated vote reporting. When Johnny B was with you at the top of the hour, that was closer to about 84% of the vote that was in. So as more votes have been counted in Wayne County, we see that Haley Stevens has closed that race, and there is definitely, as you can tell, there is still vote remaining in Wayne County, and that is a big reason why we have not projected that race just quite yet.
Trends that you're seeing here?
Trends that we're seeing here. Well, you know what? The Magic Wall has some fun little tools that you can sort of use. And one of my favorite tools that I love to use is this one. And what we see here, you can see that this is the vote over time in Wayne County, as it's been basically steady in terms of Haley Stevens having a lead. Now, if we zoom out, however, to the greater state of Michigan, and let's see if I can get that tool. There we go. Take a look here. This is where it gets really fun, where you see that at the beginning of the night, Abdul El-Sayed had a very clear lead. He has held on that lead, but it has shrunk, it has shrunk, it has shrunk, and now what we're talking about is a race that is simply put it's just too tight for anyone to project it. Reasonable folks at this hour, we're talking about a race that is less than a point, as it's gotten tighter and tighter and tighter, and we still have potentially tens of thousands of votes still outstanding to count.
This makes it nail-biting for the candidates, exciting for those watching,
yes.
For us watching. But when you see two lines actually touching each other,
correct.
You know it's close.
That's exactly right. The two lines, which have been apart all night, are actually touching, though Abdul Al-Sayed still has the advantage at this particular point, and we shouldn't lose sight of that.
By a little less than a point.
By a little bit less than a point, only a little bit less than 15,000 votes.
All right, Harry Enton, it's always good to see you. Thank
Nice
you
to
so
see
much.
you,
I know you didn't get much sleep.
No,
I'm
I
glad
got 1 hour and 20 minutes. I
Not
fell
enough.
asleep on my couch. Not enough.
Not enough. Go to bed.
I'm
let's
going.
let's now go to Jeff Zeleny, who is very much awake, live this morning in Detroit. Give us some sense of the feeling there and what it sort of feels like to be in the middle of this while it is so incredibly tight, and whether or not you think people see a path for Haley, as the polls were showing very much so that El-Sayed was going to be the clear-out winner. That's not what happened during the vote.
Sarah, good morning. Polls at this point are absolutely meaningless, and as it turns out, they were fairly meaningless in the final days of this race, because the outcome, as Harry was just talking about there, is remarkably close, and all eyes on this nationalized contest are right here in Wayne County in Detroit. Over the course of the morning, as Harry was saying there, this has narrowed even more. We're about 14,000 or so votes are separating the two candidates. So Democrats here believe that there is still a path to victory for Haley Stevens. Now, she was very clear last evening that she will unite and come together, and talked as much about Mike Rogers, the Republican nominee, in her short speech last night as she did her own opponent. But just a few moments ago, we caught up with Abdul Al-Sayed here in Detroit, and this is what he had to say about the narrowness of this race.
Look, we all understand the responsibility of beating Mike Rogers and Donald Trump, and the things that unite us are so much bigger than the things that divide us, and I think we need to start tapping into those things. And so for all the folks who might have supported my opponent, this is a big tent. We're doing the work to defeat him, and then also just to get money out of politics, put money in your pocket, pass Medicare for all.
Now, both of these candidates have said they would support the other, depending on the outcome here. The question, though, Sarah, is about these Democratic voters and the supporters here. Will they unify regardless of the outcome here? Now, the El-Sayed campaign, they are acting as though they are the winners here. But again, this race has not been called, so it's unclear if he will deliver a speech today. Also unclear if Haley Stevens will. They are looking at the same numbers that we are, and the reality here is that the clock is ticking between now and in November. But in many of these close elections, particularly here in Wayne County, we have to wait for all of these votes to be counted. But the Stevens campaign sees some hope in these mail-in votes. They did very well on mail-in votes that were coming in later yesterday. So we shall all take a deep breath and watch as the votes are counted and coming in. But there is no doubt this race is much narrower than expected. I asked Abdul Al-Sayed about that. He said it was humbling, and he said that the polls in the final days obviously were not right. That's why they kept working. The Stevens campaign also was expecting not this close of a finish here. So again, we shall see how these votes proceed. But there's one thing is clear. Mike Rogers is the Republican nominee. The unknown is, will Democrats unify regardless of who is ultimately declared the winner? Sarah?
That's right. With right now at this hour, just under, this says 1%, but it's actually just under 1%, the difference in this race. And you and I have been in Wayne County, in Detroit, seeing how they count the ballots. This takes a while, but we will see. We could have it this morning. We will see what happens in the end. Jeff Zeleny, thank you so much for all your great reporting overnight and for us this morning. John?
All right, this morning, Republican Max Miller says he is still running for re-election despite allegations of domestic abuse from his ex-wife. She and two other women have accused him of abusive behavior. Now, in an exclusive interview with CNN's Jake Tapper, Miller denied these allegations.
For no second am I going to sit here and continue to be debased by false and baseless allegations and be pushed out of a seat I have worked so hard to represent and done a terrific job for our community. I've been a good legislator. All they're trying to do is create rumor mills without evidence. It's all hearsay.
With us now, Ellie Honig, CNN senior legal analyst, former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. And Ellie, we want to kind of talk about the legal side here. And one example is something that Max Miller said right there at the end of the soundbite. He said these allegations are all hearsay. What about that?
John, that's not what hearsay is. Hearsay is when person A testifies about something they heard or learned from person B. However, if person A, in this case, Max Miller's ex-wife or other accusers, say, I saw him do this, this happened to me, I was in the room, I witnessed it, that is not hearsay, that is direct evidence.
As Jake pointed out during the interview, the congressman was saying things in that case simply not applicable. I want to play a little more of what Max Miller said because it gets to the legal side of this. Listen.
These are incredibly serious criminal accusations. And if these accusations were true, I would be in jail.
No, I should just correct myself there. That wasn't part of the interview. That was part of his video statement the other day. But it is something that the congressman has been saying. He's been saying, if this were true, I'd be in jail. Is it that simple, Ellie?
No, not at all, John. And that's because prosecutors have a burden of proof. They have to prove a case before they charge it beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the highest burden of proof in our legal system. So I can tell you it happens all the time as a prosecutor that you look at a case and you say, well, I don't know if this happened. Or even sometimes I believe this did happen. However, I don't have proof at that highest level, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, in this case, we know there were police reports filed. We know there was some prosecutorial examination of this, but we don't know exactly what prosecutors looked at. We don't know exactly what evidence they had in front of them. We don't know whether they were examining an isolated incident or a series of incidents. So it simply does not follow legally or logically to say, well, I'm not in prison, therefore I'm factually innocent. There's a lot of room between somebody being in prison and something not having happened at all.
Now, Ellie, as I said, there are other women besides his ex-wife who have come forward with allegations. One of them is Stephanie Grisham, who was White House communications director during the first Trump administration. She wrote an op-ed and she's written a book where she said there was some abusive behavior in that relationship. Now, just within the last few days, again, Miller has denied that, but just within the last few days, Grisham has had attorneys put together a restraining order for Miller here. Explain to me what's going on here.
Yeah, so first of all, John, prosecutors or investigators would be well within their rights to take a look at whether there are one allegation or multiple allegations from multiple different people, including from multiple different people, as appears to be the case here, who have not met one another. Stephanie Grisham is going into court, something that people do, and they ask for a restraining order, which would mean ordinarily no contact, no phone contact, no email contact, certainly no physical contact within a certain perimeter. And what you have to do there is make a showing that this person poses some sort of danger to you. I know Stephanie Grisham and her lawyer have also raised the possibility of a defamation suit. In that instance, somebody would have to show that the speaker here, Max Miller, made a statement that was false, that was damaging, and made that statement knowing that it was false. So I think there's a lot more to come on the legal front with respect to Stephanie Grisham and Representative Miller and perhaps others.
Ellie Honig, thank you for coming on and explaining this, because I think people watched that really long, just riveting interview with Jake Tapper that Max Miller did. Had a lot of questions about some of the things he said on the legal side. So thank you for clarifying some of that. We appreciate it. All right, we have much more. We're getting breaking news out of Michigan. Stay with us.
All right, we're getting to that point where it's back to school season, starting for kids across the country. One barbershop owner in Tennessee making sure that the kids look good when they get to school. Sean Moses offers free haircuts to all K through 12 students at his shop each back-to-back school seasons, something he has done for 30 years now. He says the tradition goes deeper than just giving the kids a fresh look.
Look good, feel good, you act good, you do good. They come back and tell me, Sean, Pastor, my child, his grade went up, and they said because of Pastor Sean, because one of the barbers gave me a good word and gave me a good haircut or bought some shoes for me.
Moses says the free cuts also help families as costs continue to climb for families. John, look good, feel good, do good, be good. You're all of those things. And now you are going to take us to a big race.
I appreciate that. The breaking news, we are watching this race get tighter in Michigan. The Democratic Senate primary there, Abdul El-Sayed against Haley Stevens. You can see right here, Abdul El-Sayed's lead is now just under 15,000 votes. Not even an hour ago, that lead was 19,000 votes. So you can see the margin getting ever tighter. Right now, there's 96% of the vote in. That seems like a lot. Where is there still vote to count? Again, I can take this down and we can look at every county where there's less than 90% of the vote reported, but there's only one. There's only one county, and it is Wayne County. This is the most populous county in the state, where you can see now there is 88% of the vote in and reported. Before, it was about 84, 85, so we've seen more vote there. And you can see Haley Stevens is leading in Wayne County, and she is expanding her lead. That is how she is eating into Abdul El-Sayed's lead statewide. You can see right now she's got a 17,000 vote lead in Wayne County. Before, it was about 14,000. How much vote is left here? This is really the one place where there is substantial vote left. How much vote is left in Wayne County? We think a lot of it's mail-in absentee count, which they have. They have those votes. They just have to count them. The New York Times is reporting there could be more than 10,000, 17,000. Is it enough to close the statewide gap here? Is it enough to close this 15,000 vote gap? Just not sure, but at this point, the race, it's too early to project, and Haley Stevens is narrowing that gap. So stay tuned as we get more votes in. Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, that being the most populous county, of course, and it takes a while. You've been in these counts. We've sat there and watched them. I've been sitting there watching it happen. Takes a minute, but we might know by the end of the show.
We could know by the end of the show.
Could know by the end of the show. All right, this morning, the FAA investigated an air traffic safety incident involving President Trump's Marine One helicopter and a passenger jet that was taking off at the same time. Let's get right to CNN aviation correspondent Pete Muntean. Okay, so we were listening to a little bit of the audio of this. Give us some sense of just how dangerous or not this was.
Well, clearly something went wrong here, because there's been this major crackdown on helicopters and commercial flights sharing D.C. airspace ever since last year's tragic mid-air collision of an Army Black Hawk helicopter and an American Airlines regional jet that killed 67 people. Typically, whenever the president's helicopters are taking off and landing at the White House, that halts all commercial flights at nearby Reagan National Airport for at least a few minutes. And now the FAA is saying this incident is under investigation. Here is the new video from independent journalist Dave Statter, where you see a commercial flight take off and then Marine One come into frame. What's clear from this and from flight tracking is that the proximity was not really close enough to officially constitute a near collision, at least in the FAA's terms. But commercial flights were about 1.5 miles from Marine One. But the air traffic control audio brings up some really big questions here. And the controller in the Reagan National Airport tower says he's having a hard time hearing the helicopter pilots over the radio. And I want you to listen now to the apparent confusion when the presidential pilots say they are lifting off from the White House. Here it is.
Tower, just want to make sure you copy Marine One, 3 minutes to lift. Tower, do you copy Marine One, 3 minutes to lift?
That's on, that's broken and readable. Marine One, you said your proceeding is briefed? Yeah.
National Tower, that's Marine One, proceeding as briefed.
So right now, a bit of a mystery of how this communications breakdown occurred. It would not be the first such case since that mid-air collision last January. Last spring, there was a flyover of Arlington Cemetery where 4 Air Force trainer jets got too close to flights that were taking off from Reagan National Airport. There was also the case of a helicopter landing at the Pentagon that lost communications with the Reagan National Tower. Members of Congress were very keen on the details of those 2 incidents, but National Transportation Safety Board Chair Jennifer Hamady just said in a rare statement just last month that not near enough has been done by Congress to overhaul air safety rules since that awful mid-air collision. Sarah.
That is disappointing to hear. We all love going into D.C. and to Reagan because it's so close, but too many close calls here. Things must be done. I know you will stay on it, Pete Muntean, as you always do, as a reporter and as a pilot. Do appreciate you. Kate?
So after floating around in space for nearly a year, a chunk of this we're showing you, SpaceX rocket, is believed to have just crashed into the moon, traveling at 7 times the speed of sound. We're waiting on confirmation of the impact from NASA and from SpaceX, but what this comes from is the Falcon 9 rocket that launched in January last year. By design, the upper section of the rocket is left floating in space. Afterward, space junk that typically falls back to Earth and burns up in the atmosphere upon re-entry. That didn't happen here, clearly, and is suspected to have now created maybe a new 65-foot crater in the moon. Joining me right now is CNN aviation and aerospace analyst Miles O'Brien. Miles, there's no danger to Earth, so check one for that's a good thing. Assuming that NASA confirms this impact,
yes.
This is just wild and fascinating that a piece of space junk just took out a piece of the moon.
Yeah, let's get the Chicken Little out of the way. That's important. But this is not by any means unprecedented. As a matter of fact, during the Apollo days, the upper stages to the Saturn rockets frequently plowed into the moon. And at that time, scientists used seismographs to determine what impact it had on the moon itself. So this happens. And the reason that this particular upper stage is headed to the moon is that the entire rocket was headed in that direction to put 2 commercial landers in proximity to try to land. One of them succeeded. And unless you add a little extra fuel to nudge it into a solar orbit, this is the direction that upper stage was headed. And that's what we're going to see at 2:35 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow morning.
Pete Mentine and I were talking a little earlier, and he was saying that this crater that we assume it created could offer some new insight actually and helpful data itself for scientists as they're planning and hope to build up, operations on the moon someday and return moon flights, to return astronauts to the moon. What could they learn from this?
Well, Kate, it's all about the plume. So it's going to plow in faster than a speeding bullet, create this crater 15 feet deep or so. And first of all, this gives people who study the craters on the moon, and there are plenty of those, we know, an opportunity to calibrate their models so they can understand, they know exactly the mass and speed and everything about this upper stage, and can test what they know about meteoroid impacts on the moon against this known velocity and known mass. The plume itself will be potentially visible as it rises above the edge of the moon. Of course, the moon is going to be too bright for us to see the impact itself, but this big plume will rise above against the darkness of space. And if you have a really good telescope, and certainly the scientific telescopes, we'll be able to look at it and see how high it rises. And this could have a lot of impact on, if you will, on decisions about building lunar bases in the future and keeping rockets away from potential outposts there.
Yeah, and what to do with all this space junk. Miles, it is great to see you. Thank you so much. I'm glad we're not going to have space junk hitting Earth yet today. It's good to see you, buddy. Thank you. A new hour of CNN News Central starts right now.
This morning, despite accusations of violence and abuse from 3 women and growing pressure from his own party, Ohio Republican Max Miller vowing to stay in his re-election race. What the defiant congressman told RJ Tapper in an extraordinary interview. And tonight, and tight and getting even tighter from last night to this morning. We just got an update on the vote count on Michigan's high-stakes Democratic Senate primary, and it's just too close to call, getting even closer. The very latest on that race. Also, a terrifying close call on a busy highway. A driver waiting for help ends up nearly getting hit, having to jump out of the way of a car that was out of control just in time. I'm Sarah Seidner with Kate Baldwin and John Berman. This is CNN News Central.
This is CNN Breaking News.
The breaking news this morning, it is getting closer. We are talking about The Michigan Senate Democratic primary, one of the most closely watched races in the country. Why? Because this could very much help determine control of the Senate in November. Abdul El-Sayed, who is considered the more progressive of the candidates, is clinging on to a lead of just under 15,000 votes at this point over Congresswoman Haley Stevens, seen as the more establishment candidate. A 15,000 vote lead. About a half an hour ago, that was 19,000. And then it shrunk. We just saw the number change. That's how it works as they report more votes as they count through the night. You can see 96% reporting at this point across the state. So where is the outstanding vote? We can tell. We can say, hey, where in the state has less than 90% of the vote counted at this point? There's only one county, and it's Wayne County. This is the most populous county in the state. This is where Detroit is. It represents about 18% of the vote. And as of now, you can see 88% reporting. The New York Times estimates there might be 17,000, maybe more votes left to count in Wayne County. So there is vote left to count. And you can see that Haley Stevens is leading in Wayne County by about 17,000 votes. And when those latest vote counts were reported about half an hour ago, her lead expanded in Wayne County from about 14,000 to 17,000. So she's been able to grow her vote margin in Wayne County and close the margin statewide. And as they count more of these votes in Wayne County, it's possible it gets even closer. You can see statewide, she's still got a ways to go. She still has to close this 15,000 vote gap. Maybe there is enough vote in Wayne County. That is what we're watching. I can show you how it changed over the course of the night. I was on AC360 last night as the first votes were coming in, and you can see this light blue line is Abdul El-Sayed. The dark blue line is Haley Stevens. He was way up, Abdul El-Sayed, in terms of where the vote was being counted before 9 o'clock. But ever since then, it's been getting closer and closer and closer to where these two lines are nearly touching right now at 9:04 a.m. Eastern time. So we are watching and waiting for more vote to be counted. One other thing I want to point out here, there is a third candidate in this race who was in this race, I should note, but who has since dropped out. That's Mallory McMorrow. I can't get this pie chart out here. She actually has about 60,000 votes right now. Excuse me, I'm bopping around here. She has 60,000 votes, and you can see the margin is only 15,000 votes. So even though Mallory McMorrow dropped out of the race, the number of votes she's getting is way higher than the margin of these two candidates. So you can see how her name may still have an impact here. Again, we're still counting 15,000 votes. Let's go to Detroit. Jeff Zeleny is there. Give us a sense of what you're hearing from maybe the candidates and just from the scene this morning, Jeff.
John, good morning. I mean, you have set the stage there for how all eyes in this very nationalized Senate contest are on Wayne County right here in Detroit, and the numbers have been changing this morning. And the reality is both campaigns, I've been talking to their advisors, are watching and waiting for these numbers to come in as we are. They do not have any more information, of course. The question is how many mail-in ballots were there here in Wayne County in Detroit, and that is something that Haley Stevens did pretty well on. So this is a very narrow contest. It's 14,898 votes are separating them out of 1.5 million votes cast. Well, there's no doubt that this race is much closer than both sides expected. Abdul El-Sayed was hoping to declare victory last night during prime time to give a speech, in his words, to sort of reframe this debate and reintroduce himself. That did not happen. Both candidates spoke in the very early morning hours. Well, just a short time ago, I caught up with him and asked him about party unity, regardless of outcome.
This morning, waking up, we said, you know what, we need to take all the time we have to start rebuilding this movement and mending fences. And so we need to move forward and defeat Mike Rogers, build the coalition that'll do that. Obviously, it's up to my opponent to do as she thinks is right for her campaign and her supporters. But I encourage all of us, right, to recognize the facts on the ground here and move forward because time is ticking.
And Haley Stevens, of course, a member of Congress from here in Michigan, has been very clear. She has said that if she is not the nominee, she will support her opponent and urge her voters and supporters to do the same. But everything is on hold for the moment as these votes are coming in. There is a path for her for victory. It's a narrower path. There's no question about that. Again, she was talking about Mike Rogers last night, or early this morning, I should say, in her speech as well. And Mike Rogers, of course, the Republican nominee, also a former member of Congress here. He narrowly lost the Senate race just a couple of years ago when Donald Trump was on the ballot here. He, of course, won't be this year. He is watching all of this, wondering who his opponent's going to be. So, John, we are going to just have to see and wait for these votes to be counted. But at this point, there is a path for Haley Stevens. It's narrower, but all Democrats' eyes are on Wayne County. And the big question, will Democrats come together? Does a closer race make that more difficult? And we'll find out the answer to that in the coming days, weeks, and less than 3 months, John.
Meanwhile, I'm going to be glued to this number right here, 14,898. We will wait and see if that closes over the next few minutes. And just one thing I want to point out, the thing I was trying to show you here before was the number, the share of the vote here. You can see Stevens at 47.5, Al-Sayed at 48.5, other here at 4%. So the people who voted for others at this point may be decisive in terms of figuring out who's going to win here. Sarah?
All right, thank you so much, John. We are all watching those numbers as they come in. Now, this morning, Republican Congressman Max Miller refusing to drop his re-election bid despite mounting pressure. Members of his own party urging him to end his campaign after Miller's ex-wife and 2 other women accused him of domestic violence and abuse. Among the allegations, his ex-wife says Miller put a gun to her head and another time threw hot water on her. The former White House communications director has a restraining order out on him, accusing him of abuse as well. Now, he's denied all of these allegations. Here's what Max Miller told CNN's Jake Tapper in an exclusive interview.
All they're trying to do is create rumor mills without evidence. It's all hearsay. Every single one of these things that you're brought up, unlike other candidates throughout the country, I've already had investigations into.
CNN's Jake Tapper joining us right now. You laid out the most serious and important allegations that are out there. Give us some sense of how he responded to you on several fronts.
Well, first of all, you guys didn't run the part of the clip where I pointed out that individuals like his ex-wife or his ex-girlfriend saying that he did things to them in their own words on the record is not hearsay. That is testimony, for want of a better word. But I think one of the things that's important for people to think about when they think about this case is one of the reasons it's getting so much attention is not just because Congressman Miller's ex-wife is the daughter of a Republican senator, Bernie Moreno of Ohio, and that Senator Moreno has now been willing to criticize publicly his former son-in-law, but because this is not the first time that a woman has accused Congressman Miller of violence. And in fact, there are stories that date back to his high school days. And so I asked him about that during our interview.
There are now 3 women who have accused you of violent behavior. Politico published a report in 2021 that says when you were in high school, you, quote, pushed a girl out of the dorm of his room and she fell down some stairs after he became enraged when she resisted his attempts to touch her, according to 3 people who were there and many more who heard about the incident in the aftermath. Now, you deny that, but the woman in question told Mother Jones reporter Abby Vasulis just days ago that it happened and was, quote, one of the more traumatic nights of her life. Now,
I would love for that individual to go on the record because that.
Okay.
Jake, I was
hold on, because I'm not done with the list of women that have accused you of violence. Then there is former White House press secretary. Okay, you were young. Then there's former White House press secretary Stephanie Grisham, who was your ex-girlfriend. She accused you of being abusive and having a violent streak. She wrote in her book, quote, I could do nothing right by him. I would wake up every morning shaking with anxiety about his mood that day. I had seen his temper before, and it had scared me, unquote. She has recently filed a temporary restraining order against you in a defamation case. And now there are these claims from your ex-wife, Emily Moreno. And I guess the question is, are all 3 of these women who don't know each other, are all 3 of them lying?
Yes, it's very easy, and I can tell you why. Every single time, and people have asked me, you know, what are you going to do? Are you going to drop out of this race? Are you going to resign? You know, are you going to get out before the deadline? And my answer to you, Jake, is no. And I can tell you why. In 2016, when President Donald J. Trump faced the most extreme allegations in the world that hit him day after day after day, and people in the media, very much like yourself and others, said that he would have no shot at winning, that he should not be the President of the United States. But guess what? He stayed in and he was resilient. And what the American people can see is that they can see that somebody is fighting who is resilient, and that is a quality that the American people cherish.
So, Sarah, I mean, you see right there that Congressman Miller is following the Trump playbook, which is to deny any wrongdoing, to attack the accusers, and to stay in the race. And it did work for Trump 2 out of 3 times, and I guess we'll see if it works for Congressman Miller.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, it could be the voter who makes the decision as to whether or not he should be in office instead of him resigning. But we will see as this seems to be mounting over time. Jake Tapper, great interview from you, as always. Really appreciate you coming on early this morning. Kate?
All right, let's talk about all of this. Joining us now is CNN political commentator Alyssa Farah-Griffin and CNN's chief political analyst David Axelrod. Alyssa, add to this now, Mike Johnson, the House Speaker, has a new interview with Politico that is just being detailed this morning. And in it, he in part says, I haven't spoken to Max about this in the last few days. Of course I will. There's all sorts of domestic events going on with 435 members of Congress all the time. It's not my business to get engaged in it. He also says in this conversation with Dasha Burns, I think Max is taking the allegations seriously. I think our colleagues are. But again, we have to allow this process to play out. It's just begun, seeming to suggest when he's talking about this ethics investigation. What do you think of Johnson's response to this here, as we now have heard so much more from Max Miller?
This is a markedly different tone from Speaker Johnson than really any prior speakers before him. I worked under Speaker Boehner, under Speaker Ryan, and there was always a sense that it was the Speaker's job to police the ranks, and that when somebody was out of step and out of moral character, or if they were doing something ethically flawed, that it could damage the entire conference, especially going into, highly disputed midterms. So this sort of, I can't keep up with everything that's going on, that's something so different that we don't really see a lot. But listen, I think Speaker Johnson's going to take his cues from the White House here, as he often does. And since, as of now, the president's tone has essentially been, these are allegations, we'll let it play out, I suspect that that's where the speaker will be. But notice, this is very different than senators who seem to be lining up behind Senator Moreno here. John Thune basically came out and seemed to imply that Max Miller should get out of the race. So you're seeing a lot more leadership, frankly, coming from the Senate on this issue than you are from Speaker Johnson.
And where things go from here now, Axe, I mean, you have Chuck Edwards, different member of Congress, Republican from North Carolina. He just this morning abandoned his re-election bid after the ethics panel released an investigation into him that found, quote unquote, substantial evidence that he had repeatedly made unwanted advances toward 2 female staffers. I bring that up because we know that Max Miller asked and requested that House Ethics look into it. And I had some speculating in conversations last night to me that Miller knows just how long these ethics investigations can last. The unknowable, though, is what impact this has on the human side of this, on his family and everything, but also immediately his reelection, because he's clearly not stepping out.
Yeah, well, look, I think that this seat becomes very, very much in question for Republicans, and I'm sure the other members of the House are saying to the Speaker, what do you mean you haven't talked to him?
Yeah.
Because we know that this is going to be a closely contested midterm, and every seat matters. So that seems odd to me that he would say that. I just want to make a larger point, and let's not gloss over the personal part of this. Yes. I heard Senator Moreno yesterday talking about the personal toll on his family, and I thought it was really, really compelling as a human being. There are things that transcend politics, and it's unbelievable to me that he would put his child through this, and his lawyer apparently accidentally released photos of the child and so on. But laying all that aside, let's just remember one thing. He went on Jake's show, which Jake pressed him appropriately and thoroughly,
Yes.
and it wasn't good. But he went on there for one reason, which was to appeal to the President of the United States' vanity and say, this is just like him, and he, you know, I'm going to do what he does. And it goes to a larger point. When your philosophy and you're the president and the leader of the party is deny, 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 others take that to heart, and he is a protege of the president's. So it's kind of ironic that the House now may be affected, and how the outcome of the midterms works out may be affected by the fact that people are following, he's following the Trump dictum. Never admit to anything, accuse the accusers. It's almost you know, Greek in its
I was going to say, are you going Greek or are you going Shakespearean on this one?
Let's say Shakespearean.
Whichever one.
More contemporary. Let's do that.
On that one. Also playing out in Shakespearean fashion, too close to call. Let's talk about Michigan, this Michigan Senate race. Yeah, there we are right now, where it stands. Berman's working at the wall. We've leashed him to the wall until this gets called, which shows what the difference is between the two. And all the focus right now, it's under 15,000 votes now separating the two. And the big focus is on Wayne County, where they are slow to count, where mail-in ballots are a real big question, and where we've seen so far Haley Stevens able to narrow. She has a lead in Wayne County and has been able to narrow that margin. I mean, if this is decided by inches, what does this do, David?
Well, look, in some ways, we talked about Shakespeare before, but let's talk a little history. In 1946, Churchill lost the prime ministership in Britain, and his wife, Lady Clementine, said, well, this is a blessing in disguise. And he said, well, if so, it's rather well disguised. I'm sure that's how they feel. But in some ways, this signifies to both factions of the party in Michigan that they need each other, that they're not dominating each other here. And I thought that they both hit the appropriate note, which is one of unity. And now we'll see if everyone follows through on that. But there's one great unifying factor, and that's Trump. And he's got a 35% approval rating in that state. He's a terribly heavy load for Mike Rogers to carry into this election. Rogers lost the last election by a hair when Trump was ascendant and winning the election. So I think there's impetus to come together. Primaries are vituperative, and this one was particularly nasty. But they both seem to be focused on bringing the party together. Now, it's easier for the one who wins to say it than the one who loses, and we'll see what the loser does when this is over.
That's for sure. And they're definitely talking of unity right now, Alyssa. But one thing that's also been a big part, look, big campaign cash and outside money and influential political action groups, they've been a real focus in this race. They're a real focus in lots of races. But it seems particularly uniquely a player, an animating factor in this race. Let me just play for what El-Sayed said just yesterday.
We all knew they were going to spend their money. We didn't know they were going to spend $70 million of their money. We didn't know that they were going to outspend us $11 to $1. And yet we're still standing.
I don't know. What do you see in how this has become such an animating piece of what, this contentious race, and what you see now in this moment of it's so tight and too close to call?
Yeah, I mean, look, what David Axelrod said, listen, this race is going to come down to a photo finish. Progressives are already spiking the football for El-Sayed, even though we've yet to call it at this point. But the reality is this, because it is such a close outcome, or will ultimately be, these two factions have to unite. And my criticism of the progressive flank of the Democratic Party in this race and in others we're seeing is they are focusing far too much on issues like the Israeli government criticizing AIPAC. And of course, AIPAC did come in with a lot of money against El-Sayed. But look at where the vote turnouts that we have so far are. You largely have white college-educated voters turning out for El-Sayed. But if you look at how Haley Stevens performed, it is rural voters, it is white working-class voters, and it is more more African American turnout. That is the core constituencies of the Democratic Party that you need to win in a general election. So you're going to need to hear, if it ends up being El Sayed, more from his campaign about coffee table issues, kitchen table issues, getting people, who feel like they don't have the help that they need, what they need, not focusing purely on Gaza, Gaza, Gaza. That cannot be the focus if you're trying to win statewide in Michigan, a state that Donald Trump won twice.
It's great to see you guys. Well, the votes still being counted. The margin now less than 15,000 votes between the two. We're staying very close to this morning. Sarah?
It's a wild one. All right, we're watching. John is literally updating things as we speak. All right, new details on the convicted felon now accused of setting one of the raging wildfires burning around Spokane, Washington. We'll speak with fire officials about the latest efforts there to try and get those fires, and there are many, under control. Also, a pilot accused of flying under the influence and trying to smuggle in a huge amount of drugs. What investigators found in his bag when he was taken into custody. Also, before he was a famous chef and reality TV star, he was just Tony. Coming up, we hear from the director behind the new Anthony Bourdain biopic. Those stories and more ahead. Rising temperatures, dry conditions. These are a recipe for disaster in the Pacific Northwest that is threatening to make the wildfires that are burning there even worse now. In Washington state, several fires are still 0% contained, and thousands of residents remain under evacuation orders. In the Spokane area, more than 10,000 acres have already been burned. Hundreds of homes have been destroyed. More than 200,000 acres across the state have been burned. Joining me now is Tom Stokesbury. He is the Public Information Officer for the U.S. Forest Service. Tom, let's start here. Give us some sense of where we are right now with these fires and just how difficult things are being made. Not just that the fires kind of create their own weather, but the weather itself is making things hard.
Yeah, well, right now we had a great shift overnight. Our firefighters are out there working 24 hours a day. We had no movement on the fire last night. We were able to complete lines, fire lines, containment lines around all three of the fires that are making up the fires here in the Spokane area fires. So a lot of great progress last night on the night shift, and of course yesterday during the day shift. We also had 0 drone incursions yesterday, which enabled us to get our aerial assets up in the air and continue to work these fires. So that was a tremendous help because of the incursions we had the previous few days. So a lot of good work over the last 24 hours here.
Look, you mentioned the drone incursions, and we should just mention again how dangerous that is and what a problem that is, that people are putting drones up and making it hard for firefighters to try to put these dangerous fires out. People need to really watch that and stop doing it. I do want to ask you, Tom, about the state of your firefighters who have multiple fires going on. They're enormous. How are they? How are they getting through this?
Our firefighters are some of the best in the nation right now that are assigned here. Our management team, California Incident Management Team 7, we're here to support them. The local community's been fantastic coming by and supporting. So the morale is high. We're here to do a job, and we're here to support this community. All three fires, they're very complex, okay? This is not a normal wildland fire. We're in the urban interface. So the complexities that come along with that are definitely challenging. But the morale is good. We're here to support this community and try to get them some sense of normalcy back. And it's going to be a long time. This is a very devastating fire, but the morale is good.
Look, there is the other issue of funding and making sure that there are enough firefighters, enough equipment. The Trump administration has gone after several states, kind of saying, look, we're not necessarily going to fund certain things. We want you to clear out your forests, clear out the brush. On that front, do you have what you need to try and deal with these enormous fires, some of which are 0% contained?
Absolutely. Right now, we're a little over 1,300 firefighters on this fire, and we're expected to be over 2,000 by the end of the week. We're the #1 priority in the nation, and everything that we've requested, we have coming in. So we're looking really good on that front.
I wish you all the best of luck. I know the residents are counting on you all to do the best you can. And so far, you're saying at least morale is high and they are out there fighting all night long. Tom Stokesbury, really do appreciate you taking the time this morning to talk us through that. John.
All right, we are watching and waiting for more votes to be counted in Michigan in the Democratic Senate primary. You can see less than 1% actually separates Abdul El-Sayed, seen as the more progressive candidate there in the Democratic race, and Congresswoman Haley Stevens, 48.5 to 47.5. It's actually less than 1% when you add the decimal points. And when you talk about the numbers, it's really less than 15,000 votes. So where is there still vote with 96% reporting statewide? There's really only one place with substantial votes still to be counted. It's Wayne County, which makes up a little bit less than 18% of the population of the state. It's the most populous county. You can see Haley Stevens is leading here by 17,000. And there's only, I say only, it's still a substantial amount, but 88% in. 88% counted. There may be 10, 20,000 more votes. Many of them might be mail-in votes, which Haley Stevens has been doing well in there. So we just can't project this race yet because there is still vote from an area where she's been doing pretty well. Is it enough vote to close this 15,000 vote gap? Still, we just don't know, but we're counting. And when the votes come in, we will see this number change. And I promise we will bring that to you as soon as it happens. Kate?
We're keeping a very close eye on that. We also have new CNN reporting laying out fresh concerns about the U.S. weapons stockpile, how this could very well impact the president's next move when it comes to the war with Iran. We'll be right back. This morning, two different messages coming out about a potential deal to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump has suggested an announcement could come by today. But overnight, Iranian state media basically responded, claiming that talks between Iran and Oman over safe shipping routes have, quote unquote, no connection to the immediate reopening of the strait. Here was the president last night.
Iran, as an example, will never have a nuclear weapon. They already can't, but it's going to be formal. The strait's going to be open very soon, or they're going to get hit very hard, and then the strait's going to be open.
As President Trump continues to threaten escalation, sources are telling CNN that the U.S. military has burned through nearly 80% of its interceptors for a key missile defense system. And senior U.S. military commanders are warning that the Pentagon's munitions stockpile is dangerously low, a big concern for Gulf allies who rely on these air defense systems. Let's get to this new reporting. CNN's Zach Cohen has this for us today. Tell us more about what you have now learned with regard to the stockpile.
Yeah, Kate, as you mentioned, we're told that U.S. military commanders are warning that the U.S. munitions stockpile is at a point where it's dangerously low and raising concerns during recent discussions with the president as he and his team have considered options for escalating the conflict with Iran. And this is an issue that not only applies to questions about whether or not this war with Iran extends even longer than it's already gone, but is also raising questions about the U.S. military's ability now to deter and potentially fight a future war against a near-peer adversary like, say, China, or provide additional air defense systems and munitions to key allies in not only the Gulf, but also around the world. And one of the most striking new pieces of information that we're learning here, Kate, is that the U.S. stockpile of interceptors for its THAAD missile defense system has been depleted by 80% compared to the number of those interceptors that were in the stockpile pre-war. That is even significantly more than the number we previously thought to be accurate. About 60% of those interceptors were burned through just in the first few months of this conflict with Iran. And these are systems that are high-end and also not just used by the U.S. military, but also by key Gulf allies who are raising concerns about this war dragging on and their ability to defend themselves against Iranian retaliation. So other systems are similarly depleted. Patriot missiles, over half of the stockpile of about 2,000 of those missiles have been used during the Iran war, and a significant number of standoff offensive missiles also have been burned through. So this holistically paints a concerning picture, not just for the U.S. military's potential risks that it's incurring as it's not able to produce enough of these missiles fast enough to make up for the gap that exists with how quickly they're using them, but also the U.S. military's ability to now counter multiple threats around the world at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Zach, important reporting. Thank you for bringing it to us. John?
Where a last-second leap saved a man's life on a busy highway. And Anthony Bourdain went from the kitchen to America's televisions. Now a new film looks at 19-year-old Tony at the start of his legendary career. All right, this morning in a truly remarkable interview with CNN's Jake Tapper, Republican Congressman Max Miller from Ohio says he is staying in the race for re-election despite domestic abuse allegations against him from an ex-wife, which he denies. Now, aside from the legal and moral implications of all this, what does it mean for politics in the race for control of Congress? With us now, CNN Chief Data Analyst Harry Enten. We're talking about just the political side here. I do want to stipulate there, and there has been a political impact. What are the prediction markets saying about this race in what is usually a safe congressional district?
Max Miller is going to cost his party, most likely cost his party a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives when we're talking about the politics of this. You could see this quite well in the Couch prediction market. Chance to win Ohio 7. Look at this. Poindexter, the Democrat, 37% on July 25th. Over the last few weeks, his chances way up to 70%. Max Miller's chances, look at this, falling down through the floor, falling into Lake Erie, going from 64% now down to 30%. What seemed like a race that was favoring Miller is now favoring the Democrat Poindexter as this scandal has hit the press.
And just note, this was 10 days ago.
This is 10 days ago.
This is not that long ago. No. That's a huge change in just a few days. And Harry, you and I have been talking about this. Is there a way to measure the impact that scandals have on House races?
Yeah, scandals matter. Scandals matter. I know a lot of people think nothing matters, but scandals still do matter in our politics, and there's an easy way to see it. Okay, House members reelected in 2022 and 2024. All members, we're talking about 85%, including those who, in fact, did not run for re-election. When you include those in the denominator, we're talking about 85%. How about members who are involved in a scandal? Look at that, significantly lower. Just 57% of them who are involved in a scandal. So they do about 30 points worse on their chance of being re-elected than all members of Congress do. So scandals absolutely do matter, like the scandal that we're seeing right now in Ohio 7.
How much interest is there in what's happening with Max Miller?
Yeah, more than that, there is a lot of interest in what's going on in his home area. You can see it in the Google searches. Take a look here.
Wow.
Google searches for Max Miller. Look at this. In Cleveland, the Akron area, which is his home area, look at that. John said, wow, up 3,200% in just the last 2 weeks. This is by far the record high for Max Miller in his home area. The people there are listening to what is going on with Max Miller, and obviously the stories are not flattering to him whatsoever.
And I said, this is a Trump district, a Republican district, but is it as Republican maybe, or what are the trends in Ohio?
Yeah, I think this is so important. This is already shaping up to be a bad Republican year in Ohio. When you have a scandal to tack onto it, no wonder the prediction markets have moved like they have. Take a look here. Ohio voters on Trump. In 2024 versus Kamala Harris, he won by 11 points. Look at his net popularity rating now. Exactly right, Johnny B. Minus 13 points. That's a nearly 25-point shift in under 2 years. And keep in mind, Ohio 7 voted like Ohio as a whole. So what is going on in Ohio very much will seep down to Ohio 7. You put it all together, it is no wonder why I said at the top of this, Max Miller, already running in a tough environment with this scandal, and if he continues to run, will likely cost his party a House seat.
All right, important analysis on this day, Harry, in a day when there was a lot of news. Much more coming up. We'll be right back.
There is a new film coming out from A24 Films that dives into the man that we know well here at CNN. Tony is a biopic about beloved chef, author, and travel journalist Anthony Bourdain, but the film is not about Bourdain's celebrity life, if you will. It's about his becoming, the chapter of his life that shaped his then long career. A young man living, working, struggling in Provincetown, Massachusetts.
What's this?
That's for you.
If anybody asks, I'm not a writer. I work in the kitchen.
I had the opportunity to sit down with the director, Matt Johnson, and star Dominic Sessa to talk about everything that went into bringing this film now to life. A good place is always to begin, I think, with especially a film like this, Matt, is just the name. Tony
right.
versus Anthony Bourdain versus Bourdain. Why Tony?
You know what? The secret of the film lies in that title, because it's about how he refers to himself as a young man versus how he comes to be known to all of us, and how he starts to refer to himself as an adult.
Sorry, what is your name? Anthony Bourdain.
There's something about owning your whole name in the public that transforms you. The movie is about growing out of your childhood nickname and becoming who you're supposed to be.
When you're doing a biopic of not full life and legacy, Dom, but then what did you think of when it came to just taking kind of 3 summers jammed into one, or one piece, one chapter of this storied life to focus in and interpret?
I mean, it just made it a lot easier for me in a way, honestly, because I didn't have to, imitate him in any way or kind of try to sound like him, or, or at least the way people kind of were exposed to him later in his life. I had a few, handful of pictures of him from the time that I kind of referenced, and then just stories from people that lived in Provincetown as well. And then from that, it was just really just trusting in the circumstances that the character was in. And I think those circumstances were pretty familiar for me in a lot of ways.
Anybody asks, I'm not a writer. I work in a kitchen.
It's more the universality of
This is what Dom says all the time.
of getting through this phase of your life. No one can be like Anthony Bourdain. He was so unique and larger than life.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But there's this universality in that, this moment in life where you're trying to become yourself.
The movie really is I recognize that, and I'm like, okay, I kind of see and feel the world in a similar way now, and then I put myself in, the shoes of, or the circumstances he described in the restaurant, and that's kind of what the movie was.
I need a job. You work in the kitchen before?
Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know that people think of Anthony Bourdain as somebody who they want to cook for them. They think of Anthony Bourdain as somebody who they want to sit down and eat with, and yet he's a chef. And isn't that interesting, right? It's the culture around eating and food preparation that he kind of was the master of, more than the actual cooking.
Let me teach you this. This is how you open an oyster. I ate these in France when I was a kid. I said they taste like the future.
It's like the oyster, like the way Anthony Bourdain talks about the oyster moment of his life in Kitchen Confidential, and as talked about many times, it comes through in various ways in the film. I loved that touch.
It's a lot harder to shuck oysters than we thought.
Did you know how before?
No, but we all learned. I was the first person to learn, and I taught myself in Toronto. I bought an oyster shucking knife, and I remember calling Dom and letting him know, you better get started at this now, because this is not this is not a joke. This is quite really challenging. Yeah. Well, it's like picking a lock. I think I always thought that you had to force it, and we do that scene in the movie where you see Dom trying to do it from a point of view of force, and where well, I won't wreck anything, but where he really goes for it, and that's the wrong way.
It's a great symbol for what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Tony trying to force his life on people, then realizing, you kind of got to relax, because life is a marathon, not a sprint.
Tony is in theaters this Friday, and there's much more of my conversation interview with Matt and Dom. The entire conversation streaming on CNN All Access this Friday as well, which you can get, of course, at CNN.com or the CNN app. John?
All right, we do have some breaking news. We're covering the Michigan Democratic Senate primary, and there has been some minimal movement as they count votes. As you can see, Abdul El-Sayed has about a 1% lead over Congresswoman Haley Stevens. El-Sayed is considered the more progressive of the candidates. Haley Stevens, the establishment candidate. But in just the last few minutes, it went from 96% reporting to 99% reporting, which is close to almost all the vote. The margin, Abdul El-Sayed's margin, changed by 5 votes. It was 14,898, and now it's 14,893. So yes, Haley Stevens made up 5 votes, but he still, El-Sayed, has a vote lead of nearly 15,000. Hang on one second here. I am told we do have a projection in this race. Just say in my ear. CNN can now project that Abdul Al-Sayed has won the Michigan Democratic primary for Senate. You can see the results right there on your screen. It has been close all night long. Haley Stevens was chipping away at Al-Sayed's lead, but now his vote lead of nearly 15,000 votes, we think that is enough so that he is the winner of this primary. As I said, this has been a very closely watched race, highly contested, seen as a clash between two wings of the Democratic Party, the progressive wing represented by Abdul Al-Sayed and the more establishment wing represented by Haley Stevens. She had the support of Chuck Schumer, Michigan's Governor Gretchen Whitmer, yet it was not enough for her to overcome this progressive challenge. A lot closer than perhaps a lot of people thought, but ultimately Al-Sayed is the winner here, we do project. And just to give you a sense of how this went all night long, into the morning, into just now, when the votes started coming in just after 8 o'clock, Al-Sayed had a big lead, over 60%. He is the light blue line, Stevens is the dark blue line, but then it got closer and closer and closer. It was too close to call, but now we do project this will hold, and Al-Sayed will be the winner, albeit by a very, very small amount. Again, one other thing to watch here as we look at this race and in terms of what it means for the primaries going forward and the general election, Al-Sayed did very well in educated counties. Washington County is where Ann Arbor is. He ran up the score there, but in more working class counties like Wayne County, where Detroit and Dearborn are, Haley Stevens won. That is an area where he will have to make up ground if he wants to beat the Republican Mike Rogers in the general election in this key swing state. This is a state Republicans would want to flip, and Democrats absolutely need to hold on to if they have any hope of taking the Senate in November. Again, CNN now projects that Abdul Al-Sayed will be the winner of the Michigan Democratic primary, a much closer race than expected, but a significant result. That is all for CNN News Central. Sarah Siner, Kate Baldwin, they say goodbye as well. Now it's time for the Situation Room.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And welcome to our viewers here in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer with Pamela Brown, and you're in the Situation Room. Happening now, major breaking news. The results are now in. CNN can now project that progressive Abdul Al-Sayed has clinched Michigan's Democratic Senate primary, defeating Congresswoman Haley Stevens in what was a very bitter and contentious race. Al-Sayed will advance to the midterm elections and take on Republican former Congressman Mike Rogers. That's coming up in November. Voters in 5 states punched ballots yesterday in several key primary races across the country. We're also keeping a very close eye on races in Missouri, Kansas, Virginia, and Washington State. Let's begin this hour, though, with the major breaking news coming out of Michigan right now. CNN anchor John Berman is at the Magic Wall. John, walk us through the latest numbers, because now CNN has made its projection.
Yeah, CNN projects that Abdul Al-Sayed, seen as the progressive candidate, will be the Democratic nominee for Senate in Michigan. But man, it was close. Less than 1 percentage point separates him from Congresswoman Haley Stevens. The vote difference right now, less than 15,000 votes separate these two candidates. It was very close. And if we just look back over the course of the night until this moment, Abdul Al-Sayed led when the polls first closed substantially. He's the light blue line. Haley Stevens is the dark blue line. But as the night went on into the morning, it got closer and closer until these lines were almost touching. But right now, we are projecting that they are wide enough apart that Abdul Al-Sayed will be the winner there. As we look at this race and maybe look for signs about what it might mean in terms of strengths and weaknesses for Al-Sayed as he heads to the general election against Mike Rogers in November, he did very, very well in the more educated counties. Washington County is where Ann Arbor is, University of Michigan, Wolverines. You can see he ran up the score there by more than 24 points. But right next door in Wayne County, which is the most populous county in the state, about 18% of the vote, it is where Detroit is, also where Dearborn is. Haley Stevens actually won. Wayne County, it has working class voters. It also has a large African American population. If Abdul Al-Sayed wants to do well, wants to win in November, he is going to have to make up ground in Wayne County with some of these voting groups where maybe he was not quite as strong in the primary. He'll need to heal some of those rifts. And one other thing I just want to point out here, again, you can see how close the margin is there, 48% to 47% roughly. There was a third candidate in this race, Mallory McMorrow, who dropped out. A number of people still voted for her, more than 60,000. You can see the share of the vote here. You can see Al-Sayed, 48.5, Haley Stevens, 47.5. Others, and this is mostly Mallory McMorrow, she had 4%, well over the margin that separated these two candidates. Would it have made it a difference if she had jumped out of the race earlier? We just don't know. One of the remaining questions. But now, of course, the issues are all surrounding what happens in the general election when Abdul Al-Sayed, seen as a progressive, takes on Mike Rogers, who has secured, Wolf, the Republican nomination.
All right, John Berman with that projection. John, thank you very, very much. Pamela.
All right, Wolf, let's go live now to CNN Chief National Affairs Correspondent Jeff Zeleny on the ground in Detroit. This really came down to the wire, Jeff.
Pamela, it absolutely did. And this epic battle of the Democratic establishment versus this insurgent progressive movement really played out in battleground Michigan. And for the first time, the progressives have netted a statewide win. But this was a much narrower win than either side expected. Abdul El-Sayed was hoping to deliver a victory speech last night in prime time. He told me that he was hoping to reintroduce himself. Some of his top progressive supporters had statements that they sent out early in the evening predicting a victory to be called shortly after the polls closed. That did not happen. And what John was just talking about there is so interesting, looking forward to the party unifying. Right here, Wayne County, Detroit, Haley Stevens, the Michigan member of Congress, performed very strong here. And the African-American vote historically is so important to the Democratic Party. That was with the Stevens campaign. I talked with Abdul El-Sayed just a short time ago this morning, and he acknowledged to me that there is work that needs to be done, that he needs to do more outreach in the black community. But he also said it's time for the party to unify and look ahead to Mike Rogers, the Republican nominee. Let's listen.
Look, we all understand the responsibility of beating Mike Rogers and Donald Trump, and the things that unite us are so much bigger than the things that divide us, and I think we need to start tapping into those things. And so for all the folks who might have supported my opponent, this is a big tent. We're doing the work to defeat him, and then also just to get money out of politics, put money in your pocket, pass Medicare for all.
So there's no doubt that spending was a major issue in this race. Outside groups spent more than $60 million to support the Stevens campaign. More than half of that was from pro-Israel lobbying groups, and there's no doubt that that had some impact on this race as well. But going forward here, Haley Stevens has repeatedly said that she will support the outcome of this race, that she will campaign for Abdul El-Sayed if he wants her to. But a bigger question is, what about this Democratic coalition? Can it come together under the vise, Wolf and Pam, of just the idea of defeating Donald Trump in November? So we are seeing deeper divisions inside this Democratic Party that we have known existed. But this Michigan race, I would say, shined a brighter spotlight on those as opposed to clarifying this direction of the Democratic Party, Pamela.
Yeah, I want to drill down a little bit on that because Abdul El-Sayed says that he's not part of the DSA, but he did share, or does, I should say, share some of their viewpoints, right, when it comes to Medicare, when it comes to abolishing ICE. What's the message here of the outcome of this race to the Democratic Party?
Well, look, I mean, his victory here in Michigan is the most significant victory from the progressive movement that we have seen in a Senate race and certainly a statewide election in a primary campaign. But the actual answer to that question, Pamela, will come after November to see if he can defeat the Republican challenger here, Mike Rogers, of course, a former Michigan member of Congress. He ran just a couple years ago. He came up just 19,000 votes short in his race with Alyssa Slotkin. So he has been running for months unopposed. So now the question is this electability question that really was a central anthem and question hanging over this race? Is Abdul El-Sayed electable in November? We will find that out. So the true test of this progressive movement will come in the next 3 months between now and November. But there's no doubt that Abdul El-Sayed is going to be asked to clarify some of his positions. He proudly supports Medicare for all. He's a Bernie Sanders progressive Democrat. So that is what we are going to see play out here. Haley Stevens, of course, was a middle of the road, a moderate Democrat. She campaigned on the fact of getting things done, her record in Congress. But this was a change electorate. The voters we talked to really across the board said now is time for change. There is so much anger and distrust at Democratic leadership that this is the biggest example yet. We've seen examples in House races in New York City, House races in Denver in primaries. This Michigan example is the biggest one yet we've seen, that voters inside the party are frustrated with their own party leadership. Of course, Donald Trump hangs over all of this, so perhaps he can be a unifying figure here, but that remains an open question as well. Looking at these results, so close, so narrow, how or if this party comes together will play a huge part in knowing which party controls the Senate after November, Pamela.
You mentioned Donald Trump. What does the turnout among Democrats in this primary tell you?
The turnout, extraordinary. I mean, it was a record-setting turnout, at least as we looked back to 1998 or so for a non-presidential primary. So the turnout says to me that Democrats really across the board, if you're an establishment Democrat, a progressive Democrat, you are eager to weigh in, voice your opinion against the Trump administration's policies. And I think to a person, Pamela, the voters we talked to yesterday talked about trying to send a message to the Trump administration, try and have a voice against the Trump policies. But we are here in Michigan, of course, to state that Donald Trump won in 2024. He lost in 2020, but he won in 2024. So this is a deeply divided state. But Democrats are enthused. There's no doubt about it. A question is those independent voters in the middle, how they will react to this race between Abdul El-Sayed and Mike Rogers. And of course, we should point out the broader context of this is Democrats must hold Michigan and flip for Republican Senate seats if they are going to win control of the Senate. So certainly it is possible. It is a tough political environment for Republicans. The president's approval rating is as low as we have seen it. But it is not an easy path for Democrats as well here. So Michigan will be front and center as well as a handful of other races between now and November.
All right. Thank you so much, Jeff Zeleny. Appreciate you bringing all that reporting to us from Detroit. And we have some more breaking news right now. The CNN Decision Desk projects State Rep Donovan McKinney, a Democratic socialist, will defeat Rep Sheree Benedar to win the Democratic primary in Michigan's 13th congressional district. So that is the latest there in Michigan. This is the House 13 Democratic primary. So these results continuing to roll in, and we will, of course, bring you the very latest. And tonight, we should note Abdul El-Sayed, the now official Democratic Senate nominee, will join our colleague, Caitlin Collins, on The Source. That's at 9 p.m. Eastern right here on CNN. And still ahead this hour, we'll be joined by Pennsylvania Democratic Senator John Fetterman to get his take on what this victory means for the Democratic Party as a whole.
And still ahead, an armed man claiming to work for the State Department arrested at President Trump's California golf course just ahead of his visit there. The details we're learning now about the suspect and the search of his home. Plus, the FAA investigating an air traffic safety incident involving President Trump aboard Marine One. We have new video this morning. You're in the Situation Room. The dramatic breaking news, CNN projecting that progressive Abdul El-Sayed has clinched Michigan's Democratic Senate primary, defeating Congresswoman Haley Stevens in what was a bitter and rather contentious race. El-Sayed will now advance to the midterm elections in November and take on Republican former Congressman Mike Rogers. El-Sayed will be speaking, by the way, live in a few minutes at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. Will carry his remarks live once that begins. Stand by for that. There's other important news happening now. Federal aviation officials are investigating an air traffic safety incident involving Marine One, the helicopter carrying President Trump. Reuters is reporting there's another aircraft involved in this incident that took place yesterday, but it did not appear to be a close call, according to the FAA. CNN aviation correspondent Pete Montine is here with me in the Situation Room. Pete, D.C. is already known for its extremely crowded airspace, especially around Reagan National Airport, as we all know. What happened here?
Well, clearly something went wrong because there's been a huge crackdown on helicopters and commercial flights sharing D.C. airspace ever since last year's tragic mid-air collision of an Army Black Hawk helicopter and American Airlines regional jet that killed 67 people. Typically, whenever the president's helicopters are taking off and landing at the White House, that halts all commercial flights at nearby Reagan National Airport for at least a few minutes. And now the FAA is saying this incident is under its investigation. Here is the new video from independent journalist Dave Statter, where you see a commercial flight take off and then Marine One come into frame. And what's clear from this and from flight tracking is that the proximity was not close enough to officially constitute a near collision by the FAA's definition. Commercial flights were about a half mile from Marine One at the time. But the air traffic control audio brings up some big questions here. The controller in the Reagan National Airport tower says he was having a hard time hearing the helicopter pilots over the radio. And I want you to listen to the apparent confusion when the presidential pilots say they are lifting off from the White House. Here.
Tower, just want to make sure you copy Marine One, 3 minutes to lift. Tower, do you copy Marine One, 3 minutes to lift? That's on, that's broken and readable. Tower, Marine One is 3 minutes to lift. National Tower, Marine One, proceeding as briefed. Marine One, you said you're proceeding as briefed? Yeah. National Tower, that's Marine One, proceeding as briefed. Okay, no 3 minutes, Roger, proceed as briefed. Marine One, you got traffic rotating off runway 1, E170. Marine One, visual traffic.
So right now, a bit of a mystery about how this communications breakdown unfolded. It would not be the first such case since that mid-air collision last January. Last spring, there was a flyover of Arlington Cemetery where 4 Air Force trainer jets got too close to flights that were taking off from Reagan National. Then there was the case of a helicopter landing at the Pentagon that lost communications with the tower at Reagan National Airport. Members of Congress were very keen on the details of those 2 incidents, but National Transportation Safety Board Chair Jennifer Homendy just said in a rare statement just last month that not near enough has been done by Congress to overhaul air safety rules since that tragic mid-air collision.
Yeah, I'm really worried about flying around Reagan National Airport, but they supposedly had put in new rules barring any other helicopters, for example, getting even close to the takeoff or landing spots at Reagan National.
And essentially that's what's at issue here. The big question is, why was that protocol not followed? And that's what the FAA will investigate here.
Let's hope they investigate and find some answers and make sure it doesn't happen again. Pete Montine, thank you very, very much. Pamela.
All right, Wolf, happening now. A man who was arrested outside of President Trump's California golf course over the weekend is expected to appear in court today. Officials say federal agents reported a suspicious person walking the property. The man was arrested on charges of carrying a concealed firearm and possession of prohibited ammunition. So let's go live now to CNN's Nick Watt. What more are you learning about this incident, Nick?
Well, Pamela, the arrest was announced while President Trump was in the air yesterday en route to that golf course for a dinner last night. Now, we are told by a federal source that the Secret Service is right now investigating whether this was a threat to the president. They say there's no initial indications that it was, but we are hearing some pretty disturbing details both from the LA County Sheriff and also from the FBI. So here's what we know. Friday, apparently this guy was spotted by federal agents who were on the course doing a pre-security check. They saw this guy, he had an earpiece, and he was taking pictures and video, they say, of their security preparations. Sunday, staff at the golf course alerted federal officials that this guy is back. He is, by the way, Janine John Tail, a 38-year-old man from the nearby city of Downey. So Sunday, he then had an interaction with federal agents. He allegedly told them that he was working for the State Department and was there as part of the security detail. Now, a quick check revealed that he had an outstanding warrant for a robbery, and during a pat-down search, a 16-round magazine was found in the pocket of his pants, loaded with hollow point ammunition. So, they also found in his car on Sunday, they found a loaded gun and then binoculars and also a badge, Pamela, reading Security Protection Agent. Now, Monday, they searched this guy's home. And there they found an illegally modified AR-15 style rifle, more ammunition, body armor, and also notebooks that we are told contain concerning statements. No more information about what those statements related to. Now, he has so far pleaded not guilty to 4 charges, 3 arms and the robbery charge. He's expected in federal court today, perhaps on a federal arms charge. And listen, Pamela, more charges could come. But obviously this is being investigated. No room for error, says the FBI, given that there have been previous attempts on the president's life. Pamela?
Yeah, very serious. Nick Watt, thank you so much. Wolf?
I'm coming up one-on-one with the Pennsylvania Democratic Senator John Fetterman. We'll talk about that marquee Democratic primary race in Michigan and the state of his party as we head into the heart of the upcoming midterm elections in November. That's next. The breaking news, CNN projecting that progressive Abdul El-Sayed has clinched Michigan's Democratic Senate primary, defeating moderate Congresswoman Haley Stevens in what was a contentious, close race. El-Sayed will advance to the midterm elections and take on Republican Mike Rogers in November. El-Sayed will be speaking at any moment now from Michigan. We'll carry his remarks live. Stand by for that. And just minutes ago, Stevens released a statement congratulating El-Sayed, saying, and I'm quoting her now, I want to congratulate Abdul El-Sayed on winning the Democratic nomination for the U.S. Senate. He is a doctor, a community health official, a Rhodes Scholar, and a dedicated Michigander. I am proud to offer my support as he takes on Mike Rogers in the general election, end quote. Joining us here in the Situation Room right now is Democratic Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania. Senator, thanks so much for joining us. I know you've criticized several of El-Sayed's progressive policies. You've been involved in a public dispute with him as well. What's your reaction to his victory that we have now projected in this key battleground state of Michigan?
Well, I think it definitely puts the seat in play. Michigan typically doesn't really elect a Republican in the Senate for a while. And now Rogers was a very strong candidate, objectively. He barely lost to Slotkin, and she's a very strong candidate, and she just barely won back then. So now, if you've seen some of the polling, El-Sayed is under maybe 5 to 6 points or more against him. And now some real money is going to flood into that state. And a lot of the things that he has done and said during the primary, we're going to come back to haunt, like campaigning with a guy that loves Hamas and is very proud to stand with communist regimes.
So you're talking about Hassan Piker?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Who was out there with El-Sayed on the campaign trail. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, you know, you'll be able to find out what he really thinks. Is he still going to campaign with a guy that proud to love Hamas? We'll see. Are you going to campaign with a guy that openly loved Mao and even dresses like him too for events? So overall, you're going to find out. He was he had a very arrogant campaign, and now today he just discovered that less than a majority of your state's only Democrats didn't even want you and vote for you. You came in around 48%. So, you know, you have a real situation as Democrats now that puts that seat in play.
President Trump just moments ago called El-Sayed's projected victory in Michigan, and I'm quoting Trump now, great news for the Republican Party, labeling El-Sayed a, quote, communist loser who hates Jews and Israel, end quote. How do you respond to what the president is saying, and do you agree with his assessment?
I'm saying objectively, as a Democrat that understands how to win a competitive state, it's like it does put it in play. And 100% the Republicans were eager to run against him, and that's where we are. And now you see how close it was, 14,000 votes out of 1.5 million votes. And now that's a divided primary. And he has said a lot of negative things towards her and other people. And now I think he's going to find out that he has to mend fences, as he said. Well, I guess we'll see.
Considering El-Sayed's win in Michigan, and we've now projected he is the winner in the Michigan primary, are you willing to consider that perhaps you are the Democrat missing what voters want from their candidates?
I mean, so for me, this candidate, I have a great relationship with vast majority of Democrats. We have really great candidates across the map. In Ohio, Georgia, in Texas, we have great ones. But, I have a real problem with people that are proud to campaign people that loved Hamas or that they love communist kinds of regime and under those kinds of policies overall. And that's why I'm saying objectively as a Democrat in the Senate saying that puts that seat in danger. And now that could, and now people like Sanders, after what he's done in Maine with Plattner, and now it's like it's creating more kinds of chaos. And now it's like, will you own the blowback and making it much more difficult to defend this seat?
If a Democratic Senate primary were held in Pennsylvania today, the Commonwealth, as you like to call it, of Pennsylvania, do you believe you would win? If there was a Democratic primary in Pennsylvania?
Like today?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean that's we don't know exactly, but overall it's 2026, so it's really kind of a theoretic.
It is a hypothetical question.
I mean,
but I asked the question because you told my colleague Manu Raju last month, you probably remember, that you would leave the Democratic Party if it adopts an anti-Israel policy, calling it your red line. What exactly does that look like, and at what point will you make that decision to potentially leave your own Democratic Party?
Well, I've said this, if the Democratic Party adds that into the platform, if they say we become a party that will never vote for aid for Israel, or if we will define Israel as the aggressor, or that's the problem in the region, so then that would force me to reconsider that.
That one issue alone, just Israel, if the Democratic platform upcoming were to say some anti-Israel stuff, you would leave?
Well, that's become the defining, really the defining litmus in this race. I mean, if you've been following the Michigan race, it was AIPAC, 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 AIPAC. I mean, that really made that the center of that race and all the other races across our country. So
AIPAC, the pro-Israel lobby organization. Why is Israel, another country, your red line right now? This is what your critics are saying, rather than a domestic issue that impacts Americans' everyday lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with a lot of Democrats, too. And then when you migrate into these extreme kinds of views and embrace the kinds of people that should really be considered toxic, so, of course, I'm entitled to my opinion, and if you're proud to campaign with those individuals, great. That's really up to them. I called trash Plattner. I called that he is a real problem, and now why people seem to be okay with it. Why was Bernie Sanders okay with the guy? And he was already the Nazi tattoo. And after all the allegations of roughing up his ex-girlfriends and saying terrible things, indefensible things online, and you would push these kinds of candidates that put our ability to reclaim the majority at serious risk.
I hear everything you're saying, but why is Israel your red line, the major issue that would force you potentially to leave your own party?
Because I think we have our nation has a very special responsibility to protect and support Israel. I mean, we're Democrats. We're the ones that have a very kinds of progressive values. That's the nation that only has those kinds of similar values in that entire region. And now, if you look at the kind of danger and the circumstances there, remind people that Israel is not the aggressor. They've been pushed into this existential war, And now I think for me, it's very critical that I'm proud to say I will always vote and support Israel.
So this is still an issue potentially, I'm not saying you're going to do it, potentially that could force you to leave the Democratic Party?
Yes, I've said that a couple times.
So it's still there?
Yeah, of course that's there.
Because I want to be clear, some of your colleagues across the aisle have openly hoped you'd switch your party to the Republican Party. If you were to leave the Democratic Party, would you become an independent or a Republican?
I don't know, but as I've said this, there are no Republicans that are pro-choice and pro-union and pro-gay community. I mean, all of those things. So, if you consider me politically homeless at some point, now I have put me at odds, and I don't know why. I think more people can appreciate, calling out people that are appropriate, whether it's people like Plattner or whether it's someone like Hassan Piker, or you have people, incoming Congress people that were going to wipe their mouth with the American flag. I mean, it's like, why is it? It seems like if you can't criticize or call that out, because it seems like if you are a DSA people, run your own banner. Run, hey, I'm going to run as a DSA, the
Democratic
DSA Party.
Socialists of America.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we want more socialism, and now we become more embracing communism in many of those circles.
So you think socialism eventually emerges and becomes communism? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying, what's become acceptable to say, for example, now organizations like J Street have now made it okay for Democrats to vote against even supporting Iron Dome, purely defensive kinds of a system. Why would you not support that kind of a thing? And that's pushing us in the Democratic Party. Are we willing to turn our back to Israel? History has demonstrated that if a nation or people will turn their back to the Jewish community, that has some very tragic outcomes.
Congresswoman Haley Stevens, who just lost this Democratic primary in Michigan, echoed calls across the Democratic Party for unity heading into the fall. Are you willing to unify with Abdul El-Sayed, for example, who's now the Democratic nominee, the Democratic candidate?
Oh, yeah, the tough guy. He called me ugly and then I should be on a pike. And I'm like, Chief, I own mirrors. I know I'm an ugly guy. But if you want to put me on a pike, I mean, he has like a little man syndrome kind of energy. And now he was really arrogant in that race. And now he have just found out that, less than a majority of Democrats want him. And he has a serious responsibility between now and November to hold that seat.
So you think he could lose to Mike Rogers?
Oh, 100% that's possible, without a doubt. I mean, the polling seems to indicate that it is in danger.
So how should members of your party, the Democratic Party, come together to defeat the Republican candidate?
Yeah, well, I can't come together with someone if you are willing to embrace people that loves Hamas or that thinks America deserved 9/11. I think that's reasonable, and I think that's the reasonable view. Being able to kind of be like, well, maybe and try to ignore those things. That's not a big tent situation. There are things that are unacceptable to have these views as a Democrat, I think.
Senator John Fetterman, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it very much.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for coming in. This programming note, Abdul El-Sayed will appear on The Source with Caitlin Collins, 9 p.m. Eastern tonight here on CNN, and we'll be right back.
Back to our top story this morning. CNN projects Abdul El-Sayed will win the Michigan Democratic Senate primary. These are some pictures right here we're showing you from Detroit, where El-Sayed will be speaking at any moment. We'll carry his remarks live, and we're also keeping a close eye on several key primary races across the country this morning. A lot going on. So with us now to talk about all of this is CNN senior political analyst Ron Brownstein. Hey, Ron, great to see you. So let's start with this Senate race in Michigan. CNN is projecting Abdul El-Sayed will win there. It was a really close race, down to the wire. What is your takeaway from this contest?
A perfect metaphor, Pam, for the overall year. I mean, this year has seen, I think, the most systematic conflict between left and center and Democratic primaries in modern history, certainly the most I've seen in over 40 years of covering politics. And each side can post, significant victories. I mean, the left has won House races in New York, and Denver again last night, in Detroit with Thanadar being defeated. But the center has its victories too. Iowa Senate race, California governor race, some of the other House races. And here, their biggest victory yet. One thing that is really important about this race is that most of the left advances this year have come in safe blue districts. Well, last night, El Sayed's win is going to be the biggest test of whether that Sanders-style progressive argument can win a swing state. By the way, they also won a swing district nomination around Lansing in the House, similar kind of test.
It is, and we're going to talk about the other races in just a second, but just sticking with Michigan here, the turnout for the Senate primary race in Michigan surpassed the previous record from the August 2020 primary. What do you think is the driving force behind that?
Yeah, and I think Democrats, 500,000 roughly more Democrats than Republicans voted in the primary. It is an indication that, you know, as we're seeing in all of the polling, that, as is often the case, but on steroids this year, the party out of the White House is more motivated to vote. You know, Trump's strong disapproval among Democrats is astoundingly high. And whereas you have about 20% of Republicans who now disapprove of Trump. And, you know, those people are unlikely to cross over and vote for Democrats, but it's unclear whether all of them are going to show up and vote. And the primaries, like the special elections, have sent a pretty clear message that Democrats have an enthusiasm and turnout edge that may, that is going to matter in November.
So I want to talk about this Missouri race and this rematch in St. Louis. You had Congressman Wesley Bell easily fending off former Congresswoman Cori Bush, a Democratic Socialist and one of the members of the squad. So what does it say to you that progressives were unable to score a win in this part of the country?
Yeah, it says that, and I know we're going to
actually hold on. I'm going to pause you, Ron, because it looks like El Sayed is talking right now. Let's listen in.
I want to say, just first and foremost, how grateful I am for the opportunity to participate in democracy. Now, my family immigrated to this country from a place where there is not democracy. You cannot just put your hand up and run. And the ability to do this, to have our voices heard, to select our leaders, it is a gift that sometimes we take for granted. So to have participated means so much. And to my fellow participants, I just want to say how grateful I am to you. Senator McMurray, you ran an incredible race. You fought to end the corporate corruption in our politics. You took on the power of AIPAC. You were willing to speak truth to a level of power that sometimes is unbeatable. And I just want to say thank you and how grateful I am to have your support here today. I cannot wait to see what you do next. And I hope that for as long as I'm in this work, that we can be in this work together. Thank you. To my colleague and friend, Congresswoman Haley Stevens, we shared a great conversation this morning. And I know that it was a bitter end to this very long primary, but I also know that Haley brings the best of herself to her work. She is one of the most committed public servants that you'll ever meet. She loves democracy like I love democracy. And whatever differences that we might have had in the primary, they pale in comparison to what unifies us. A recognition that so long as we want to keep our democracy, that democracy better be working for people, and that all of us have to come together to make sure that we never let Mike Rogers see the inside of the U.S. Senate. So, Congresswoman, thank you for your race. And I have to say a few more thank yous before we talk about where we're going next. First, I got to thank my wife, Sarah. I really, when we decided to jump into this race, I knew that it was going to be tough for me, but I also knew that it was going to be particularly tough on our family. And the fact that she held it down alongside her medical practice, alongside making sure that our daughters didn't experience this without thinking life was just normal, that takes just an extraordinary amount of effort and sacrifice. So I just want to say how grateful I am to you, love, and I'm so honored and thankful that we get to continue this. 20 years on, it's been a hell of a ride. I owe her a 20th anniversary on our 21st anniversary because we definitely didn't get one of those this year. To my daughters, I know that they're not watching, but you know, I wish this meant I get a little bit more time with you, but give me 3 more months. To everybody who put their shoulders into the work, anybody who made a contribution, who knocked on a door, who made a phone call, who put yourself into this democracy, who gave us your stake in democracy, this movement, this moment is for you. And I just can't say how grateful I am to have earned the votes that we got. We took on a machine. You're not supposed to be able to beat $70 million of outside spending, a record amount of money spent in a campaign against a Democrat in a primary in any campaign. You're not supposed to be able to beat that. And what we showed is that the power of our many is greater than the power of their money. What we showed is that if you're willing to build a movement brick by brick, if you're willing to go and travel your state and have the conversations in rooms big and small, starting in moments when people aren't even paying attention to an election, but are paying attention to the price of gas and the price of groceries and the price of housing and the price of healthcare, that you can build a conversation that builds into a movement that defeats Goliath. This is what you all showed. And my hope is that our democracy will never be the same. So when Big Pharma and Big Tech, when DTE and Blue Cross come a knocking saying, you know what, this is our democracy and we're going to own it, from here on out, we can always point and say, no, this is the people's democracy and we will always own it. This would not have been possible without the incredible efforts of so many allies and allied organizations. I gotta give a special thank you to my first endorsers. Bernie Sanders, the OG, who came in on day one, put his entire shoulder in the work. I just hope that I can help to carry some of that load in the fight for working people and Medicare for all that he's been carrying for all of this time. To the UAW, the unbeatable, indomitable UAW. As a son of immigrants, son of a father who came to this country to build cars, I gotta say that this is still the best place in the world to make an automobile, and that is because of the fighting UAW, but it's also the best place in the world to build a family because of the fighting UAW. And our work is about making sure that the folks who want to sell our democracy off to corporations and special interests don't get to take that away, and I stand in lockstep with our UAW sisters and brothers. To the AFT, the National Nurses United, the AFGE, the AAUP, thank you so much for your work. To all of the advocacy organizations who made this possible on the ground. Folks like the PCCC and Move On, folks like the Working Families Party, all of the constituency organizations who knocked on doors and made phone calls, thank you so much for putting your shoulder into the work. I also have to thank all of our endorsers, 300 strong, who came in, spent their time with us, came from just down the street or came from across the country to talk about what it looks like to build a movement of the people, by the people, and for the people. I want to say how grateful I am to you. We built this campaign brick by brick. Back in April, I remember talking to a room of 5 people in a discussion that most people will never clock, but it was an opportunity for us to share a honest conversation about pain and about purpose. And I've been able to have 500 more of those discussions over the past 15 months. I trained to be a doctor, and the single most important moment that makes a clinical encounter is that moment that somebody shares their pain with you, believing that you could do something about it. I don't practice medicine, as has been well documented by all of you. But I hope that I get to practice that part of things. And I've been able to practice it, but it requires people being willing to share their pain with you so that you can do something about it. That is a moment, a piece of vulnerability people give you because they believe that you can actually fix it. It's an investment, sure, in a campaign, but it more is an investment in democracy. And as we traveled our state, we were in living rooms in Lansing, VFW halls in Escanaba, basements in Grand Rapids, churches in Detroit. I got to meet so many of you, Michigan, so many. And you shared both what caused pain, but also what brought purpose. And we forged a movement out of that to get money out of politics, put money back in pockets, and pass Medicare for all to guarantee health care in this country. And for our troubles, the corporations, the special interests, who would rather get to decide who our elected officials are than let us decide who our elected officials are, they spent an unprecedented amount of money to beat us. Attack ad after attack ad after attack ad after attack ad. Wall-to-wall ads. But it turns out that the commercials are the part of the television show most people don't want to watch. It turns out that you can spend as much money as you want on lies, but it doesn't make them true. It turns out that when you're able to reach out and dignify somebody's pain, people remember that a lot more than a 30-second ad played on a loop on television. And it turns out that when the people want something in this democracy of ours, the people can get that thing if we're willing to do the work of that. And that's exactly what Michiganders up and down the state showed. 12,000 volunteers knocking nearly 10,000 doors a day to defeat an unprecedented amount of outside money, $70 million. But right now, as bitter and as divisive and as cynical as the campaign against us might have been, I want us to realize that there is so much more that unites us now. Because the campaign that Mike Rogers and Donald Trump and their GOP MAGA allies are launching is already more bitter. All you got to do is look at the ads you're already watching on TV, started today. You know, they think that you want to use my whole name against me. Mike, listen, man, if you can't say the name, it's Abdurrahman, keep the name out your damn mouth. I'll be happy to give you lessons. But they understand that the only way that they think they can win is to drag us into the mud, to believe the worst about each other, to believe that what divides us is bigger than what unites us. They want us to think that the reason some of us ain't got is because of other people got. But it turns out that the reason so many of us ain't got is because of the system that has corrupted our politics to take it away from us. And that is the thing that we are taking on now. That movement to get money out of politics, put money in your pocket, pass Medicare for all, it is a big movement. So if you supported me or you did not support me, if you voted for Vice President Harris in 2024 or you voted for Donald Trump, if you believe like me that you ought to be able to afford your groceries, if you believe like me that you ought to be able to afford your home, if you believe like me that your tax dollars ought to be invested in you rather than sent somewhere else, if you believe like me that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people is our birthright in this country, if you believe like me that we have a responsibility to stand up and walk with our union so that everybody has collective bargaining rights in this country, if you believe like me that you ought to have the guarantee of good health care in this country without some corporation trying to tell you what you cannot have and should not fight for, I hope that you'll join this movement now. I want to speak specifically to an issue that has been focused on in this race. To my Jewish American sisters and brothers, one of the most indelible memories of this campaign will have been the opportunity to break bread with you at Seder, to worship with you at Shul, to be embraced by you. And listening to sisters and brothers who said, you know, I want to join this movement because AIPAC doesn't speak for me. Because I understand that self-determination for one people does not require the quenching of self-determination for another people. That unless all of us are free, none of us are free. I want to tell you the great gift that you've given me. And to all of my sisters and brothers of the Jewish faith, or any faith at all, or no faith at all, I want you to know that my commitment to your safety, my commitment to Jewish safety, is the same commitment that I have to the safety of my own daughters. Because if there is one question of a political philosophy that ought to animate us all, is what would we build, what would we do if we treated all of our kids like they were all of our kids? How would we spend our money? Where would we put our investment? How would we embrace one another? What kind of schools would we build? What kind of health care would we offer? What kind of jobs would we protect? And I say this because there could not be a greater contrast between that philosophy and the cynicism of Mike Rogers. See, Mike's a guy who spent 14 years in Congress with one goal: to figure out how to cash out the day he left. And guess what he did? As soon as he left Congress, after having taken corporate check after corporate check after corporate check to empower the corporations to pick your pockets, he went and he cashed out. Not in Michigan. No, winters are too cold for him. He's got thin skin after all. He went to Florida. So, Mike, if you want to be a Florida man, go be a Florida man. If you want to golf in Florida, go golf in Florida. But I promise you in November, we are going to send you back to Florida. Mike Rogers is the guy who wants to put a data center in your backyard so he can make himself feel a little bit more manly by making an AI video. Mike Rogers is the guy who has never shied away from a DTE check so he could turn his face in the direction of Florida. Mike Rogers is a guy who will do anything Blue Cross Blue Shield wants him to do, including raise your rates. Mike Rogers is a guy who introduced legislation to increase the flow of opioids. He did that while I was in high school. Mike Rogers is a guy whose politics and vision and perspective are old. Mike Rogers is a guy who has never shied away from a corporation he could do a favor for. Mike Rogers is a guy who, believe it or not, went back to Florida so he could lick every single boot Donald Trump owns to beg for his endorsement. I'm so sorry. If you want a senator who's going to lick some boots, fine, go vote for Mike Rogers. But if you want a senator who's going to stand up to Donald Trump, then you've got your option right here. And what's funny about Mike Rogers is that he's like the worst of all versions of the Republican Party, right? He's the worst of the neocon version. I mean, he was in the House during the entirety of the Iraq War. He left because he got tired of it. And then he swore up and down he could never support Donald Trump until, of course, he was licking Donald Trump's boots. So now he carries the burden of both of those things. Is he MAGA? Is he neocon? Nah, man, he's just a corporate sellout. So, Mike, I'm going to say right here, I know you're going to say no because you're a coward. 5 debates, all right? If you're willing to stand with me and have a conversation, you and I both know that you will wither in front of your own crimes. But I'm going to make sure Michiganders know about them. Because at the time we're done, you are not going to have safe quarter from people holding you accountable to what you've done for them here in Michigan. We will send you back to Florida where you belong. 5 debates. I'm hoping for an answer today. It's going to be a lot of fun, my guy. But I want to finish here because it's not about Mike Rogers. It's not even about Donald Trump. It is about who we are as a country. I worked in that building right there. In fact, you could see the window of my former office. And there are moments I had to pinch myself because my story in America is about as unlikely as it gets, but for an accident of history that allows my dad to immigrate to Detroit to go to Wayne State University. I was supposed to be a cab driver in Egypt, like my cousins. I would spend a lot of my childhood summers in Egypt. I'd spend them there with a front row seat to what my life should have been. Except for I got to be born in America, where I got vaccinated against diseases that killed an aunt and uncle I never got to meet. They died before their first birthday. I got to go to amazing public schools, an incredible public university. I got my medical education paid for by a public agency at the NIH. That's what America gave me. Now, the crazy thing is I grew up not 20 minutes from here. And in traveling 20 minutes, I travel a 10-year life expectancy gap. I got to meet kids who never got the opportunities I got, despite the fact that their families had been here far longer than me. I know what America gave me, but I also know what America continues to deny too many of her own children. And a lot of my work in that building right there was about trying to address exactly that. And I kept running up against one thing: the kind of politics that tell us that we cannot invest in those children because we should be sending their money to deny rights to other children abroad. A politics that tells us that the corporations should do what they can and the rest of us do what we must. A politics that tells us that our democracy is there for the taking if you have enough money to take it. And so when the opportunity to run for U.S. Senate came up, I realized that this was a fight not just against Mike Rogers and Donald Trump. It was a fight for the kind of America that can give what I had to all of her children. That is the work in front of us. This country of ours, this America of ours, is more than a flag. It's more than a set of colors. If you're a patriot, then you better fight for an America that is America for all of her kids. That's what this is about. Building a movement to take our democracy back, to serve the people who absolutely deserve the best of what America has to offer them. That's the commitment all of us are making. So whether you voted for me or voted for my opponent or didn't vote at all, we're inviting you to that movement to get money out of politics so we can put money back in pockets and finally guarantee the promise of health care through Medicare for all. And I am so honored for all of the folks who've already invested, to all the folks who haven't. I cannot wait to meet you, and let's go win in November.
Hands up for a question, please, and say your name and outlet when called on. Start here.
Joey with the Associated Press. You mentioned that you spoke with earlier. Can you talk a little bit about what was said, if she indicated whether she would be endorsing you?
She will absolutely be endorsing us, and she will be fighting alongside us to make sure that we defeat Mike Rogers and win the future in November.
Other questions? Looking for locals. Go here.
Arlette Saenz with CNN. This was a very tight race, perhaps closer than you had hoped or expected, about 15,000 votes right now between you and Haley Stevens. Does the fact that this was such a tight race make it more difficult for the Democratic Party to unite and also reach out to those swing voters who might be looking and seeing, well, Democrats couldn't even agree on their candidate here?
Well, I'd love to get others' perspective on this, but let me give you mine. You heard about the historic turnout. Sometimes, you know, intra-family squabbles are the biggest ones. But we all know that when we walk out the house, we stand united. And sometimes we gotta have it out about the conversation about who we are and who we want to be. And I think I'll tell you that the things that unite us are so much bigger than the things that divide us. If anything, when you've got 500,000 more voters who came out to be a part of a process to pick a nominee, that means that their voices have been heard. And we're going to build a movement that reaches out to everybody. I know not everybody's going to agree with me on everything. That's not how this works. But I do know that they agree with me on the need to beat Mike Rogers, and the need to hold Donald Trump accountable, and the need to provide people health care, and the need to address the affordability crisis that is making it so that all of us struggle simply because we want to pump gas or go to the grocery store, and the need to stop fighting stupid wars we should never be fighting. There is so much more we agree on. So I'm looking forward to unifying together. The Congresswoman and I, the Senator and I, we've had some great conversations about where we go from here, and we cannot wait to come together and win in November.
Dr. El-Sayed, what do you see being your biggest challenge? We're gonna let the chairman answer the question.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. As our future senator said,
you've been listening to Abdul El-Sayed, who CNN projects has won Michigan's Democratic Senate primary. You heard him say there with his "When we shook up the world." Wolf?
Very dramatic statement indeed. And we want to welcome our viewers, Pamela, here in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer with Pamela Brown, and you're in the Situation Room. Abdul El-Sayed defeated the moderate Congresswoman Haley Stevens in a very contentious and close race. He will now advance to take on Republican Mike Rogers in November. These results could potentially signal where the Democratic Party is headed. CNN's Arlette Saenz is on the scene for us in Michigan. She's covering this primary for us. Arlette, I know you just questioned El-Sayed during that news conference. Tell our viewers what he said.
That we need to lower costs for families.
Well, Abdul El-Sayed is here speaking, so I'm speaking a little bit quietly, but he talked a lot about the need for the Democratic Party to emerge from this primary united. And I specifically asked him if he was concerned at all about the incredibly tight margins in this race and whether that will make it more difficult for Democrats to unite and for swing voters who might be looking at this and say that there wasn't a consensus even among Democrats about who their nominee should be. Now, El-Sayed said to me that sometimes the the internal family squabbles are the ones that are the biggest, but that he ultimately thinks that there is still a lot where both sides, El-Sayed and Stevens supporters, continue to have common ground on, and they feel that they will be able to bring the party as they keep their main focus on trying to defeat former Congressman Mike Rogers, who is the GOP nominee here in November. But El-Sayed really used a lot of his remarks earlier, before he started taking questions, to try to make that appeal across the board within his party, but also reaching out to other voters who might be more swing voters, might be potential Trump voters that he wants to try to bring into the fold, arguing that a lot of what the progressive movement has stood and the energy that has been around them is something that can carry into this November fight. But certainly this is a major moment for the progressive movement, as El-Sayed has been able to declare victory here in a battleground
Arlette, hold on
state,
for a moment. He's just took another question. I want to hear what his answer is.
You know what it is? They're BS policies. So he can point to my name all he wants. But I'll also tell you this. I've been in Abdul in Michigan my whole life. This is like the best place in the world to be Abdul. You know why? Because the Michiganders they're big-hearted. They're open-minded. They're earnest, and they're gritty. And Michiganders are sick and tired of BS politics coming in to divide us when there's so much more we can unite to actually guarantee if we're willing to come together around it. So if all Mike Rogers got is that his name is Abdul and my name is Mike, you're going to be surprised how many people will be like, yeah, but that's the Abdul who wants to bring down the price of my groceries and gas and stop us sending money abroad and make sure that I got health care. So yeah, I like that Abdul over your Mike from Florida.
Doctor, thank you. Ed O'Keefe with CBS. You talked about where you addressed Jewish voters in the state and the concerns they may have. You asked about Islamophobia. You know that the Republicans and others will seize on one other thing, and that is things you've said in the past. One of them back in April, after the attack on the synagogue here in Michigan, you gave a statement about what had happened, among other things, and this is what you said. You said, hurt people hurt people. And it's that part of your statement that has caused a lot of concern for Jewish voters. Republicans are going to seize on it. What did you mean and regret saying?
What I mean is that hurt people hurt people. That maybe if we're serious about ending the hurt, we should stop hurting people. That's what I mean. I condemned the attack. It was a vile anti-Semitic attack. And I think it's important for us to be asking the big picture question about what's happening now. You've got a Republican Party that is morally bankrupt, that is actively hurting people. And I think if we're serious about addressing a lot of the crises as they stand, maybe stop trying to divide people from each other. Stop trying to pass policies that have us going to war instead of investing here. Stop trying to nickel and dime people at every turn because of the corporations you support and do favors for. And so, look, I stand in solidarity with my Jewish sisters and brothers. And we can condemn anti-Semitism, and at the same time, we can be talking about how we bring people together. And we can be talking about everybody's pain. And I think anybody who does not want to do that is not serious about actually addressing the hurt that we see across the board. So I'm trying to unify people around the things that we need and deserve in this country. And as I said, my commitment to Jewish safety is the same as I've got a commitment to my own kids. And that's the highest commitment I can offer as a father.
And when the Attorney General...
Thank you, press. We're going to wrap there.
Thank you.
All right, so there we have Abdul El-Sayed, who's now the Democratic candidate for Senate from the state of Michigan. He's going to be running against Mike Rogers in November. He defeated Haley Stevens in this primary contest, and now he was reaching out to people in Michigan, including the Jewish community in Michigan. Arlette, we heard him say he wanted to address specifically what he called my Jewish sisters and brothers, and make the case that he was against anti-Semitism, even though he's very critical, of course, of Israel. Give us a sense of how big of an issue potentially this is in Michigan, a large Arab American community in Michigan, Muslim community, but also a very significant Jewish community in Detroit and elsewhere in Michigan.
Yeah, Wolf, the politics of Israel really loomed large throughout this entire campaign. And I thought it was notable, not just that El-Sayed addressed that here in that question, but it was included in his introductory remarks as well, saying that he acknowledges he needs to do additional outreach to the Jewish community at a time when the politics of Israel have been very divisive and heated for the Democratic Party. We saw throughout this campaign, El-Sayed had criticized a lot of Israel's actions relating to Gaza, and he also took aim at the amount of money that had poured into this contest by AIPAC, that pro-Israeli lobby group, which had spent more than $30 million to help boost his opponent, Haley Stevens, in this contest. So that is an area where El-Sayed likely will have some work to do as he tries to bring Jewish voters into the Democratic fold and ensure that they don't peel away to Republicans in November. But I thought overall, El-Sayed in his remarks today really had stressed that call for Democratic unity. He knows he needs to be able to keep the party together in this moment. There's various factions and coalitions within the party between progressive, establishment. If you think of the prominence of black voters, especially in an area like where we are in Detroit, that was a key coalition for Haley Stevens. He will need to bring them into the fold if he wants to be able to keep the party together heading into November. But Republicans, Wolf, had made very clear that they plan to outline even newer lines of attack against El-Sayed in these coming months. We have seen already digital videos from Mike Rogers' campaign, from the campaign arm of Senate Republicans. They've released videos trying to paint El-Sayed as too radical for Michigan voters. They've also tried to tie him to some of those more controversial figures within the Democratic Party. For instance, like Hassan Piker, he was featured very prominently in a lot of those videos that were released today. So a lot of work ahead for El-Sayed if he wants to keep this Senate seat blue in November. And of course, Michigan will be a key part of either party's road to the Senate majority next year.
Certainly it will be a battleground state. Arlette, thank you very much. Arlette Saenz on the scene for us in Michigan. Pamela.
All right, Wolf, joining us now in the Situation Room, a Republican strategist, Shermichael Singleton, and senior advisor to Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign, Karen Finney. They are both CNN political commentators, and boy, do we have a lot of politics to talk about today. Karen, I want to start with you. This Michigan Senate primary went down to the wire, and that in and of itself is notable. You just heard Abdul El-Sayed's victory speech. Do you think he will be someone who will be able to bring Democrats together?
I absolutely do. I mean, look at the turnout that we saw, the historic turnout. He mentioned this in his remarks across the board, not just in the Senate race, but also look at in the gubernatorial primaries. I mean, Democrats turned out in huge numbers to make their voices heard. And I do believe we need to not underestimate the impact of how badly people want to defeat Donald Trump. And Mike Rogers has been out there saying that he will be a rubber stamp for Donald Trump, particularly in a state like Michigan. That is problematic. There's so many issues that have hurt Michiganders, starting with tariffs, and I could go on, where I think the ability to unify and to put together a winning coalition, I think Sayed is up to the task.
So let's talk a little bit more about Mike Rogers. Shermichael, the GOP Senate, Mike Rogers, is out with this new statement labeling El-Sayed a, quote, extremist. Many Republicans were openly hoping for El-Sayed and El-Sayed blowout in this Democratic primary, but this was close. How are members of your party feeling about Rogers' chances in November?
Well, it was very close, but Mike Rogers is correct. He is an extremist. This guy is not a traditional moderate-leaning Democrat who believes in bipartisanship. This is someone who comes of the vein that you have to destroy everything and build it all over again. This is someone who said you should defund the police. He doesn't believe ICE should exist at all. So I suppose no level of enforcement for immigration in our country, according to some of his beliefs. And though he says he's not a member of the Democratic Socialists, he hangs out with a lot of Democratic Socialists. Mike Rogers is someone who spent years in the FBI fighting corruption white-collar crimes. He's someone who spent years as a public servant trying to keep our country safe as chair of the Intelligence Committee while in the House. This is someone who has years of experience, bipartisanship, working across the aisle with Democrats, which is something that we don't see often anymore, something that I would argue most independent voters, Pamela, would like to see a return to. They do want a fighter. I'll give Karen credit there. Democrats, I believe, want a fighter. Independents want a fighter. But what they do not want is someone who's going to say, let's destroy the entire system, because Americans still believe in the system. They just want the system to work, and Mike Rogers is that guy.
Karen, I know you have a lot to say in response, so I'm going to give you that time. And also, what do you make of Democratic voters in a purple state being so narrowly divided by these two very different candidates in Michigan?
Yeah, well, a couple things. Those are the talking points you're going to hear over and over and over again. And we're also going to, I'm going to just predict right now, this is going to become a very racist, bigoted attack against the first Muslim American to run for, to win a nomination and potentially become a senator. So those are the talking points. That being said, look, it was narrowly divided because I think, Abdul said something really powerful. We're having an internal conversation in our party about what's the way forward. How are we going to, not just fight Donald Trump, but what do we want to then fight for when we are back in power? And if you look at his record, again, I think there's a lot that Michiganders will like about how he has worked inside the system. Actually, he's talked about it, where he was able to get $7 million of medical debt erased for 300,000 people. He was part of Joe Biden's healthcare task force. This is a person who understands how to move an issue, move policies. But there were, the primaries are about trying to highlight differences. So of course it was pretty divided, and that was their job. But again, we can't underestimate how powerful the desire to send a signal and to check power of Donald Trump is going to be in the general election here.
Pamela, if I can quickly, I just want to make one thing clear. It is a big moment for many Arab Americans in this country to see El Sayed do so well. This has nothing to do about his ethnicity or his familiar background. He's an American. That's an irrelevant point as far as I'm concerned as a conservative.
That's not going to be what the talking points say.
My point is simple. There is an ideological shift occurring within our country right now on the Democratic side. There are individuals who don't have college degrees, blue-collar workers. There are older voters of color who clearly did not, you look at some of the exit results, did not vote for Mr. El Sayed. That is a strategic problem that he's going to have to reconcile with in order to build the coalition necessary to win. This is a purple state. This is not New York City. It is not Washington, D.C. And that is why I believe Mike Rogers will have a strategic and a structural advantage, specifically as it relates to targeting independent voters.
I wonder, though, what you say, Michael, to Karen's point about the turnout here. I mean, this was record turnout for a primary. Does that concern you at all, that Democrats are energized and fired up because they don't like what President Trump is doing or what Republicans are doing?
Well, look, it is a point of contention for us on the right to reconcile with the reality that a lot of Americans have real legitimate pain points economically. We have to address that. But I think to draw the contrast to someone like a Mike Rogers with the opportunity and the experience to, again, work across the aisle to address the issues of affordability and housing, et cetera, for the American people that they're yearning for recognition to address, as opposed, again, to someone who's going to go to the Senate and be a no against everything, including his own party. We have seen what some of these DSA candidates have articulated. They want to not only burn down many of the things they disagree with, they want to shift things within their own party that make it unworkable. I don't think that's what people want.
Yeah. Go ahead quickly, Karen.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, he's made it very clear he's a capitalist. Look, I'm going to just quote somebody who won the presidential primary in 1988, Reverend Jesse Jackson in Michigan. He is going to put together a rainbow coalition of independents, of Democrats, of moderates, of people who want, you don't have the kind of turnout we saw yesterday if you're not committed to defeating a candidate who is in the mold of Donald Trump. Unfortunately, Mike Rogers won't be able to be the kind of person Michael's talking about because, as we've seen, none of the Republicans have been able to do that with Donald Trump in the White House.
All right. Thank you both. Great discussion. Sure, Michael Singleton, Karen Finney. Always lovely to have you both on. And a quick programming note, Abdul El-Sayed will appear on The Source with Kaitlan Collins at 9 p.m. Eastern here on CNN. Wolf?
And we'll, of course, be watching. Still ahead, a CNN exclusive, Congressman Max Miller's fiery denial of abuse allegations. We'll talk to our own colleague Jake Tapper about his interview with the Ohio Republican as pressure builds for him to drop his re-election bid. Lots going on. You're in the Situation Room.